All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first meeting of the Subcommittee on Public Safety for the House Appropriations Full Committee. My name is Andy Welch, and our committee members are here. We have some others that will be coming in. Dave, if you want to come up to the dais, you may. Captain, if you want to come up here, oh, okay. All right. We'll have others that will join us shortly. We tend to start promptly at the time allotted, which was 1 o'clock. We have had members that are trickling in, so the issues that we're dealing with today are important to the administration of justice throughout the state. We will be dealing with primarily the judicial branch, although we will start off with the Department of Law, and the Public Defender's Office will follow. There's Mr. Bruce, and we want to, and then after that we will be focused on the judiciary. As Representative Bruce, if you'd like to join us up here, that'd be fine. And Bill, I don't know if there's a spot for you up here, it'd be good. I don't know if there is. Members of the committee, I want to thank you for your diligent work on this committee over the last 5 years with me. And I want to express my appreciation for you joining us today. We have kind of a tough budget climate this year, so we have a lot of work to do. Chairman Green, thank you. We have a lot of work to do today, and this may be a set of hearings that takes longer than just today. And tomorrow and the following day, we may have to cycle back through certain agencies as we dig deeper into the budget and the cuts that are being proposed. With that, what I would like to do is before I introduce Attorney General Carr, I'd like to introduce everyone that's walking behind me. Leslie Solis is at Kennesaw State. She's a senior at Kennesaw State University. She's an intern in our office, and she has a major in poli-sci. So she'll be helping us out today. And if you have questions or need a document, she'll be the person to ask. Obviously, Courtney George is here today, and Brian Groom from the House Budget Office. And I thank them both for their hard work preparing us today, and also for their research that they will be doing over the course of the session. With that said, Attorney General Carr, I'd like to invite you up to the podium to speak. And if you would, just go over both your amended and your fiscal year 21 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you and the committee members for allowing us this opportunity to talk today about the fiscal year, amended fiscal year 2020, as well as the fiscal year 2021 budgets. As you all know, we strive every day to provide the highest quality legal representation to our agencies, boards, and authorities that comprise the state government, and to make sure that our department continues to have that reputation of dependability and honesty and integrity with the citizens of our state. So, Mr. Chairman, if I could mention just briefly a couple of priorities that we have before I get to the amended, if that would be okay, I will go quickly and just mention those as well. So let me just start with information technology. As I have mentioned to this committee last year, we're working very, very hard to improve the way that we're doing business at the department. And to do that, we have placed an emphasis on updating our information technology operations. In today's world, it is of critical importance that we ensure that we're protecting the sensitive client information and data that we have from possible cyber threats and attacks facing our state. And for this reason, we have made cybersecurity and litigation support a top priority. And additionally, we're trying to find new ways to utilize information technology to find efficiencies to better support the core operations of our department. We're always exploring new ways to utilize that technology, and I want to thank you for your support for the department. And as I had mentioned, we have a new CIO, Clark Rayner, who will be helping us do just that. Let me mention election litigation. The primary duty of our office is to defend the Constitution of the state and the laws of the state of Georgia. And recently, our state's election laws have become a central focus of litigation. The fiscal impact that this litigation will have on the state in the coming months and years is significant. It will also impact our department from a personnel standpoint, both internally as well as through the special assistant attorneys general that we have hired to use as well. So as we head into an election season again this year, followed by redistricting and subsequent elections in the future, the department needs additional support in order to continue to handle this increased workload. It's why we have placed further emphasis and prioritized resources around elections litigation, and we hope that you will partner with us, and we appreciate the funds that have been recommended in the governor's budget for an additional attorney in our elections section. Human trafficking. I can't not say thanks to each and every one of you for supporting us. We now have our human trafficking prosecutions unit up and running. We are fully staffed as of Labor Day. And in fact, today we are working with law enforcement officials to indict an individual on trafficking crimes. And we expect more indictments to come in the very near future as we continue to aggressively prosecute human trafficking in our state. Unfortunately, there is no shortage of work, and we are working together with our partners, and we appreciate your support and that of the Governor and First Lady in this important area. And finally, Medicaid fraud. Fraud and abuse within our publicly funded programs harms the state's most vulnerable citizens. It is a brazen theft of our citizens' hardworking tax dollars, and it won't be tolerated by our office. Mr. Chairman and the committee, just so you all know, we have three principal responsibilities in Medicaid fraud. Investigate criminal fraud committed by Medicaid providers, investigate abuse and neglect of patients in healthcare facilities funded by the Medicaid program, and collaborate with local, state, and federal authorities on investigations and prosecutions. I've asked our team to emphasize investigations involving the abuse of older or at-risk adults, schemes involving opioid overprescribing and dispensing, and scams targeting Medicaid beneficiaries. The division currently has about 500 active investigations going on right now. And over the past 4 years, our office has recovered anywhere between $4 million and $124 million per year in Medicaid fraud recoveries, that money going back to the state through the Department of Community Health. And over that time, the state has spent roughly $1.2 million per year on the unit. So it's an incredible investment and an incredible return for the state. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I will quickly identify some of the changes in our amended fiscal year 2020 budget. And in September, as y'all are aware, we were given the instructions to reduce the mid-year budget by 4% and 6% in the fiscal 2021 budget. We've met that directive by keeping certain open positions vacant for current and future openings as needed, while continuing to focus on those priorities of the office, and some of which I have just mentioned to you. We feel that we can meet the reductions without disruption, and we appreciate your support in our priority areas as we move forward. So I'll start with 33.1.1, which is an adjustment to DOAS premiums, which is a statewide change. 33.1.2 reflects a transfer of funds from the Secretary of State for legal services. You will find there is funding recommended for an elections litigation attorney. I've just mentioned that as a priority. We are currently maximizing our internal capacity with elections lawsuits against the state, and there are more lawsuits coming our way this year and in the future. And the reality is there is a limited number of trained private sector attorneys who are qualified to handle election cases. And those that we do oftentimes have conflicts which prevent them from representing the state in our cases as well, which is a challenge. But at the end of the day, it's our job to defend the Constitution and laws of the state of Georgia, and it's critical that we have the resources to do just that. 33.1.3 identifies a reduction of funds by freezing vacant positions, and that is the 4% cut, which I spoke to earlier. And Mr. Chairman, you want me to go into the 2021 budget as well, or stop there?
Let me just direct everyone, if you're following in your budget book, the Attorney General is reading off of page 248 of your budget book. If you have that, that's the Department of Law. Both the amended and in this fiscal year's budgets are included in those sections. And then also, if you're on the track sheets that we're using, we're on page 17 of the track sheet for section 33, Department of Law, for the amended, and then on page 18 for the track sheet for the fiscal year 2020, just to make sure everybody can follow along with you.
I apologize. Thank you.
No, that's good. So with that, no, I'll let you go ahead and let's first, I think we'll just take questions on all of it at
Sounds
one
good.
time. So go ahead with the rest of it.
You got it. So fiscal year 2021 budget, 33.1.1 to 33.1.4 are all statewide changes. 33.1.5 is funding for the fiscal year 2021 budget, continuation funding from the amended budget regarding the elections litigation attorney position. 33.1.6 is the 6% budget cut for the full fiscal year, which I spoke to you about previously. 33.1.7 is funding for one attorney in the human trafficking unit and remains obviously a top priority for us, and I mentioned that before. 33.2.1 through 33.2.2 statewide changes. 33.2.3 allocates increased funding for the 2 Medicaid fraud investigators. So I just mentioned that priority as well. One thing I didn't mention, Mr. Chairman, is this is a federal program, so the state contributes 25% and the federal government contributes 75%. So again, for a program that accounts for $1.2 million in state funds, a significant return on investment, and our team is doing, I think, an outstanding job in that regard. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for allowing me to present, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
That sounds good. Let me ask Mr. Al Williams, who had his light lit up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Always good to see you, Mr. Attorney General.
You too, sir.
If you remember, probably last year and the year before, I asked this question, so I'm on a roll, so I won't break it.
That is all right.
Your fraud unit, the amount of money recovered from fraud. I want to know if you got a breakdown on the fraud recovered from providers and that recovered from recipients or patients. Where is the breakdown there?
So the purpose of the Medicaid fraud is to go after providers, and so we recover for either the state or for those that have been taken advantage of. So I'll give you the breakdown of what we've recovered: 16, 17, 18, and 19. In 16, we recovered nearly $14 million. Okay. 2017, nearly $125 million. 2018, nearly $11 million. And 2019, $4 million. So again, but to your point, Representative, these are, one, it's individuals that are supposed to be getting a benefit that are not. Mm-hmm. And number two, this is Georgia taxpayer dollars that are being stolen. For lack of a better, they're flat out being stolen. So we think that this is important, and again, as a piece of the Medicaid puzzle, but to me, larger part of the elder justice approach that we're taking to make sure that we're going and protecting those in the most vulnerable situations.
Quick follow-up, please,
yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman. It is politically very popular to talk about the patients that are robbing us blind. But we don't hear much about the real robbers, and that's the providers.
Oh yeah, no, it's not the patients, it's the providers.
It's the provider.
I agree with you.
We politically talk about how folk abuse this and abuse that, but by the time what's left, the clients ain't got nothing to steal. It's already been stolen.
I agree.
We just need to make that clear because it's popular in Georgia to talk about how people abuse the system, Medicaid.
Well, these are the providers, and I think we play a critically important role in making
Good
sure
job.
we recover. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Vice Chairman Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Attorney General, first of all, appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
I've got two questions, I guess, neither one of which relate to the other, but I'm going to go ahead and just throw the first one out. I know that one of your main focuses over the course of the last couple of years, right after you came into office, was opioid abuse. You set up some statewide task force and did some things like that. Can you just give us kind of a quick recap of where you are and what you're seeing right there?
Absolutely. You know, unfortunately, it doesn't matter where you go in the state. It's an issue that impacts everybody. It impacts K-12. It impacts universities. It impacts law enforcement, nonprofits, you name it. So I appreciate you mentioning the statewide task force, which the purpose of which is to get all 10.4 million Georgians, anybody that has a passion or an interest or expertise in this issue, to the table and talk about what we can do to solve that problem. So one, what are we all doing to address the crisis? Two, how can we work together to address the crisis? And three, if there are gaps, how do we fill that gap? My preference is not to necessarily come up with another government program, but to tap into that expertise that we already have in this state, which includes the CDC and so many others. So we continue to do that, and we will have more statewide task force meetings this year. One of the big areas that we have been a part of our own litigation in this space with manufacturers and distributors. We filed a lawsuit in Gwinnett County in business court, and we've got a good group of Georgia lawyers that are helping us represent the interests of the state. There's obviously a federal litigation going on right now in Ohio We are not a part of that, but we are negotiating as a part of the states that have brought their own separate lawsuits, including states that have not. So we're trying to come to a global agreement. I don't know that we will get there, but it was important for the state of Georgia to have its own lawsuit in order to protect our interests, and having it in business court has made a big difference in the state as well. It is a costly, dollar-wise as well as people-wise issue, and unfortunately, we've seen a little bit of decline in the number of overdoses, but not nearly enough. So we got to keep going.
Well, I will say this. I know that I've attended a couple of the task force meetings, and you guys do a great job in bringing awareness to it. And I think that's probably the key right there, because you've generated a lot of free publicity. There's been a lot of things out there bringing awareness to it, and I think that's where we start right there, is with the awareness factor. So I commend you on that.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. The second thing, totally unrelated to that, I want to jump here to 33.1.7, increase funds for one attorney in the human trafficking unit.
Yes.
Which obviously that's a big push right now, both from the governor and from you, and you guys are doing a great job getting on that. The amount of money there. Is that for just one attorney? Is that support, or
one attorney?
That's just one attorney, the cost of the attorney.
That's correct.
And benefits and other things. So it's no support there.
Just for the role of the attorney.
Okay. How does that compare with the other attorneys in your group, or is this such a specialized thing that y'all feel the need to have that number?
Well, and let me see the sheet if I could, Adam.
It's about,
So
probably 194.
It's been a specialized area, and in part because you are dealing with children. And so that's why we also have an analyst. It's why we also have a victim advocate. But I think that it's important to be able to get the most qualified individuals we have. We have one of our attorneys came from Cobb County, the other came from DeKalb County, so we've got two great prosecutors. Again, I think in this particular space, we want to make sure that we're being aggressive on the buyers and the sellers, and we're being sensitive to the victims who have, generally speaking, probably been abused in their lives. Could be a situation of addiction. There could be any number of issues, and I think making sure that we do this the right way, legally as well as humanely, makes a difference.
So basically, I guess maybe the recap on the thing could be that if you're going to get the right person, which is so important in this position, you're going to have to pay for the experience, and you're going to have to pay for the knowledge.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Right.
All right, let me, Chairman Belton, you have a question?
Thank you, Commissioner. And speaking on that same line, I really appreciate the governor's and the First Lady's attention to the human trafficking issue. And your two questions. First, and then of course, my company I work for, Delta Airlines, they require every single employee to have this kind of training, and I think this is incredibly necessary. Can you talk a little bit about the successes we've had, if any, over the last couple of years on this issue?
Well, I think with the increased awareness on this issue, there's no doubt we're actually seeing Georgia Cares is one of our nonprofit partners that helps victims, and you can see their numbers. I think they were at 700 victims assisted last year, and it was 120 or 130 different counties. So you've seen numbers go up. And many will tell you that's because awareness has gone up, and so victims know that they have more resources to go after. People will say, well, I hear, Georgia or Atlanta is the number one human trafficking city in the world. Well, I don't know that that's right or wrong, because it's so hard to get information about it, but I do know this: we've become the number one state to tackle this issue because it's a nonpartisan issue. You are seeing local law enforcement, you're seeing our U.S. attorneys, you're seeing the FBI, our GBI have been incredible partners in this. We've been doing this now for 3 months. As I mentioned, you're going to hear some news out today. You will hear some other indictments that have come. And the importance, I think, of our unit is we're going to get better outcomes if we're working together with those federal and local partners. But you're seeing that this is such a transitive industry, unfortunately. It's oftentimes based online. Today they'll say they're in Valdosta, and tomorrow they're going to be in Macon, and the third day they're going to be in Augusta. So to have a statewide focus where we can partner and coordinate, I think is critically important. We are seeing success, but unfortunately, we got a lot of work left to do.
Thank you. And this 194,000, is that for salary only, or is that?
I'm sorry?
This number?
Yes,
Okay. Is that enough? Do we need
salary and
two-
benefits.
Do we
Salary
need
and-
two people to do this, or is one attorney going to be okay?
We're very grateful for this opportunity.
All right, Mr. Bruce.
Hi,
How are you, sir?
I'm good. I may be in here and I may have just missed it, but do you also have a department that's funded that would look into complaints from citizens related to elected officials in cities? Misuse of funds. I think somebody from our office had called you about this, but we never got an answer.
We may. There may be a public corruption piece to it that we might play a role in, but if it has to do with state funds, state officials,
City funds is what I'm more interested in.
generally that would be the local community and the DA, the sheriff, the police chief that would look into it if it's criminal. If it's civil, it's a little bit of a challenge, and this is one of those areas I've found a little bit of a gap. Because oftentimes, if you have a city attorney or a county attorney, which is generally where we encourage folks to go to first, but oftentimes that city attorney is hired by the city council, the county attorney hired by the city or
Right.
by the county commission, and that can be a challenge. If there's a
The bigger
criminal,
challenge is if it's the attorney that the complaint is about.
then that can be a challenge as well. If it's criminal, you could go to the DA, but the DA oftentimes will need to conflict out. Then we can help find a conflict prosecutor, or we ourselves could handle it. When it's civil, it gets a little bit more dicey, and I don't have a great answer for you, but it goes back to what I said before. We try to help, because again, every city resident or county resident is also one of our constituents too. We want to try to be helpful, but we may not have official jurisdiction to do anything. If it's open meetings, open records, that's another area where we could help in. But that can be one of those areas that a pop fly could drop in the outfield, and something maybe we need to all look at.
Okay, because I'm trying to figure it out, because I get a lot of complaints, but the complaints are about the attorney. And when you get those kind of complaints and you don't have anybody to refer them to, I'm thinking you. But you're
And the
telling me
complaints
no.
are often about attorneys.
But you're telling me, no, it's not you.
They don't report to us. If there was criminal activity, we could potentially help depending on what it is. But if it's truly just a local issue, and one of the things I've seen is sometimes it's political in nature, and other times they just don't like the answer that's given. But if there were true mis or malfeasance, there might be a role for our office, but I would encourage people to call us and let us look at it, and then we can figure out where to go from there.
All right, thank you. Mr. Attorney General, I have a few questions for you. These are going to delve into the weeds a little bit. I want to know, in both of these budgets, well, I say both budgets, in our fiscal year 21 budget, there is an increase for $1,000 to raise the full-time regular employees' pay. I'd like to know from you how many of those individuals you have that are going to receive that $1,000 that's being paid at $40,000 or less.
Don't have the answer right now. Got Courtney. We received Courtney's email request, so we will definitely have that by Thursday.
Well, how can you not have it right now? Because it's in your budget request of $43,000.
I don't
I mean, I
have
can do the simple math and divide.
right 43.
I know we're a bunch of lawyers in here, and that's hard for a lot of lawyers to do, but that seems to be the number, 43, with some benefits that are tacked on, so probably around 40. But let's get that
Okay.
number. The second thing is that we have vacancies, that you have reduced vacancies, but as I recall, the department was in need of additional support lawyers, in need of lawyers to help out with discovery purposes, to help out with your Medicaid fraud division, to help out with human trafficking, as well as just general attorneys to serve your office. what we've seen now is a reduction in your workforce by freezing vacancies, which is effectively to take away last year's number, about $1.3 million that would have otherwise gone to employees. I am presuming that well, I'm not going to presume. So, and then this year, another $1.9 million also freezing positions. What I'd like to know is how many positions are being frozen that are attorney positions within the department, first off.
We are taking them on a case-by-case basis. We will have, Travis, what, is it 15 vacancies at any one time? Or Adam, there's about 15 vacancies that we could have. Now, that may not just be lawyers, it may also be support staff.
Okay,
But
well, how many, first question is, how many lawyers?
How many lawyers are open?
These are the people that are going to prosecute the cases. They're going to do all the legal analysis. And despite one city attorneys that referencing Mr. Bruce, I feel confident your lawyers do a really good job. And you hire them and select them, and you have a lot of seasoned attorneys there. So how many lawyers are we losing?
I'll have to get that information for you, Mr. Chairman.
And then how many staff members?
Sure. I'll get
And then
that.
I'd like to know what those relative salaries are.
Sounds
Because
good.
these are talking about positions, right? These are, but
Yep.
there are no lawyers that are being laid off or,
No layoffs.
so it's
Just not filling positions as they come up. And there are some, again, in the areas that you have mentioned, that we feel are essential that we'll have to fill, but there are other areas where we feel confident that with the vacancies that we can meet the requirements of the budget.
and given the fact that you've had the vacant positions, and if I'm ballparking the number, it looks like it's $3.5 million worth of vacancies, it's $3.2 million worth of vacancies, it appears. And then based upon the numbers we just saw there, so that looks like, well, I'm trying to do math on the fly here, and that's not ever good, but you're looking at about 12 to 15 positions, it looks like there. So, and those are lawyers based upon the $197,000 we just talked about for the human trafficking position and the election position. So that's significant in terms of the cut. And you said 15 vacancies, so that actually would follow suit with my math. With that said, it's concerning because we've been trying to fill. At one point in time, your office did have a human trafficking attorney. And she left, and I don't know that position was filled. But I'm concerned that we're seeing cuts. We've had vacant positions that haven't been filled, and now we're asking for 2 new positions in particular areas, and I have concern about those being filled. Can you speak to those being filled, what you're going to do to make sure you have people there, and we're not just creating other vacant positions that we can't fill anyway?
Sure, and I believe I'm following you as it relates to elections and human trafficking. We're confident we're going to be able to fill those. Those have been priorities for the department. We know that we're going to need it. And if we didn't use it, human trafficking would be one specific area, but if it's not elections, we know we'd have to find a SAG that would be able to fill the workload need. I'm confident that we can find individuals for those positions. And again, in order to meet the budgetary requirements, we will do what it takes, but we will, we're going to look at each opening as they come up, what division they come in, what section they come in, what's going on at that particular time to determine whether or not, in order to meet our mission, we can do that.
Okay. And then in addition, I want to ask about the fellowship program that
Yes.
it started with the committee. I believe it was 3 years ago when you first came in.
That's right.
Attorney General,
So-
you started a fellowship program to recruit young legal minds out of law school to come work for your department, get experience, but also hopefully maybe choose a life of public service as a result of their experience with your office. Can you speak to that?
That's right. And Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you and this committee for the support y'all have given us. It's been great. We have had 2 classes of 3 each. We've got our 3rd class coming in. A reminder, these fellows are either Georgians or they go to a Georgia law school. And the goal is to get them into our department. It's a 2-year commitment, and we've had some great success. We've got a couple 3 that are coming in this next fall that are Georgians. One goes to Emory, a couple are from out of state. We have had 2 opportunities to hire. We've hired. We had 2 others that the opening came early in the fellowship, and I wanted to show the committee that we would run this fellowship out for the 2 years, and we missed the opportunity to hire them in those positions. One of the things I will be doing differently is if a position comes available and the fellow wants to be to stay in the department, we're going to go ahead and fill that position with them, but keep them as a fellow for the remaining 2 years and then put them on the payroll, which also will be a cost saving. But it has been a great.
We'll explain now. If we've
Sure.
got the fellowship program.
Yep.
And it's an entry-level position to get them into a posture that they may be looking to be a permanent employee of your
That's
law
correct.
department. Both you think that they're capable, and they prove themselves as capable, and they want to do it.
That's
If we're
correct.
cutting positions, how are you going to offer them a job?
If they are in a position, if they are interested in a position that is of priority to the department that we need to fill in order to do our mission, we would certainly look at them hiring
Okay,
them.
so how many left over, after we make the cut of 15 positions, presuming that some of them are not all attorneys, how many vacancy positions do we have left, or how many positions are vacant currently left in the department?
Well, if we take the 15 positions are vacant at any one time during the month, we would again have to look and see where those vacancies occur and see if we can match them with a fellow in a priority area in order to meet the needs of the department, the mission of the department, and the criteria of the budget cuts.
Let me ask you a different way. Given these cuts, how many vacant positions do you have for which a fellow could actually move into?
We'll have to find out which are lawyer positions, and I'll get that back to you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Let me just make a few concluding remarks, and then I'll let Al ask another question.
Sure.
I'm not, to be clear, and to the folks that are here in the room, the questions are intended to be to delve into these issues. It is important for us to have that information in order for us to make policy decisions either consistent with the governor's recommendation or consistent with the policy recommendations that this body, this subcommittee, has worked on diligently over the last 5 years. To keep in that trajectory, we have to have the data. Otherwise, we are making, blunt cuts. We're not being surgical about our analysis here, and we're rubber stamping, and we don't do that. So we've never done that, as far as I know, and I'm not going to start now. So the questions, those that are in the room that are coming up next, those questions are going to be asked of you. I want to know those numbers. And that's why Courtney emails out beforehand, requests that you have those numbers so that we don't have to play catch up later. So it is essential and helpful to this committee to do its budgetary work to have that information in advance or to have it at this hearing. Otherwise, we'll continue to have hearings over the course of the session to make sure we get that information. Now, with that said, I also want to point out something. Now, Attorney General Carr, he's the first guy up, so it's no reflection on him or his office at all. This is a general statement to everyone. But I also want to say that you have done a phenomenal job of looking at the areas that are of extreme weakness within your department. You've come in and you've had to take over and you've had to address issues like IT. Most of the discovery that is done these days for lawyers is done via the internet. It is via e-filings. These documents come in and they can be loaded with viruses that can impact the entire operations for the Attorney General or our state. This is kind of the common practice in the practice of law today, to not have individuals capable of monitoring your systems and preparing for those kind of violent attacks, whether intentional or unintentional. Leaves you vulnerable, and you are doing everything to address that. On human trafficking, you have taken up where Sam left off, and you have taken that to additional levels, and you're looking to increase your workforce to be a better prosecutorial element for everybody in the state. For every local jurisdiction in the state that needs assistance with this, you have an Attorney General that's got your back. In addition, you have worked to set up a system to build in this fellowship, to recruit Georgians to work in our office for public service purposes. And on all of these efforts, Mr. Attorney General, I want to commend you because you have taken a very strong leadership position in all of these. The opioid epidemic that Vice Chairman Rogers was talking about, the elections division efforts on that, which is highly important to secure and make sure that our elections are fair and are done appropriately. All of these are just, in my mind, they're just essential elements both to public safety and to our democratic process. And I want to commend you for those things and looking out for those who have no voices that would not otherwise be heard of in this Capitol. And one final note I'd like to just reflect upon is that I saw Lindsay, Edward Lindsay, and he was in this room just a few minutes ago. And Edward Lindsay and Chuck F. Strachan and Ms. Ballinger, myself, and several others in the House, and Renee Unterman in the Senate, have really worked over the last decade on human trafficking issues in this state. So I commend you, and I commend the governor, and I commend the First Lady, especially for her work on this. And I hope that we continue to be the place that attacks this issue with the great vigor that you have already lent yourself to. And I appreciate all of that.
Well, thank you for your support.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your observations. And Mr. Attorney General, this is not necessarily directed toward you, but there are several other people in here waiting. But I do have one specific question and a follow-up with the fellowship program. I understand the problems there. What's been the success of your minority recruiting efforts, and what can you tell us has happened? Is it fair, what you're looking for? Can we see some results, and what are the numbers?
We always can do better, and one of the things we're going to do too, Representative, is we've talked about doing I don't know if job fair is the right way to call it, but to see if we can't get with our agencies and our lawyers that recruit SAGs and see if we can't go out and target more minority lawyers, minority law firms, women-owned firms, and see if we can't broaden the pool, because we can always do better.
Okay, thank you. My follow-up is, in general, for those that are waiting, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for being so direct, and that I've been here 17 years, 18 years soon, and it has always bothered me, as an elected representative, that we've come, and for some reason, most of us has taken the line of those that folks expect us to report about. In other words, when we get up here, we hear far too many, "I've got to get back with you." No, the time is now. We heard that in the full committee. It was a lot of getting back. But we want to hear what the deal is today and how it is. So those of you that are responsible for numbers, if you're not ready, let us move you down the list, because we don't want you to come up here and say you got to go back and get back with us. You've been notified. We're talking about numbers. It's not like we're asking what color you're going to paint the room next week. These are things you should know when you get to us, and we're kind of expecting it. We spent too much time with legislators being the tail that's wagged, and we accept everything that comes down, and people are not happy with how we handle the business that we're sent here to do, and that is not to agree with everything that's sent down. I appreciate the Constitution officers. They do have a lot more room because they are elected. But folk, please don't come and give us the dog and pony show. We've already had that. Now tell us what we're feeding the pony today. Thank you.
Mr. Attorney General, again, just so we're clear and so the public's clear, Attorney General Carr and his office and staff has been very upfront with us in providing us information. These questions were given at least about the vacancies to them yesterday, so they've had just a little bit of time to do that. But I want to express my appreciation to the Attorney General. Your office has been forthright and helpful in these regards. I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that those numbers will be forthcoming within, frankly, probably in the next 15 to 20 minutes as you walk across the street and get back to the computers. And I'll probably start seeing emails coming through or text messages. So I'm confident in that, and I appreciate your service very much, and your staff service has been excellent and responsive to the members of the committee, and I fully expect that to continue.
And Mr. Chairman, let me say I thank you very much, and I am also very respectful of this body's role in oversight and the role in the appropriations process. I'm very respectful of the role that the governor has, and as Representative Williams mentioned, as a constitutional officer and a student of history, I understand that we are not in this process. This is reserved for the governor and for the legislature. And as a wise man once said, I got friends on both sides, and trust me, I'm solidly with my friends.
All right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Attorney General. We appreciate your presentation. And you can always be tough on lawyers because they've got thick skins. What I'd like to do is
Are you a lawyer?
calling up.
Well, go home back. Go back.
Next up, we have Jiminique Rogers, our interim director for the Public Defender's Office, and her staff. We're grateful to have you here. I know we're running a little bit over time, but we're going to keep on it, and it's going to take however long it takes to get the information we need is how long we'll spend on it. So, Ms. Rogers, I'll let you go ahead with your presentation about the budget, and if you could just be as expeditious as possible.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the support of this committee that we've had over the years. I'd like to give a little bit of the context for the budget before we begin. As you know, the Georgia Public Defender Council is responsible for ensuring the state's constitutional and statutory obligations. We do that through providing representation, superior courts, juvenile courts, accountability courts, and the appellate courts. Since we took our first client, as I mentioned at the appropriations hearing, and that was on January 1st, 2005, that we took our first client, we provided representation in more than 2 million cases. In FY19, we opened 140,000 new cases, and halfway through FY20, we've already exceeded the number of new cases that we've opened at the same point in FY19. We anticipate that this upward trend will continue. As you heard, human trafficking is being emphasized, or the prosecution of human trafficking in this state, as well as gang prosecution. So we anticipate the number of cases that we have defending and ensuring that those cases go through the criminal court system will increase as well. Now, we carry out this mission as a very lean agency. Historically, we've been lean since the recession because we had a number of positions that were not backfilled and were not funded following the recession. We have approximately 430 state-funded employees and 350 county-funded employees who work across 153 counties to provide representation. The majority of our state employees are statutory positions, and that means that the minimum number that we have in each of the circuits is set out in Title 17. Other than those statutory positions in the circuit office, we have only 34 juvenile positions that were provided by the legislature to carry out our mandate under OCGA 1712-23C, and 7 other positions in our circuit that we have put in place to avoid or settle litigation. Now, this is the small team of individuals we have in our circuits responsible for all the cases that we handle each year, and representation for each of those new cases involves hours of working with the clients and their families, visiting the jails on weekends and evenings, canvassing the area to perform investigations, as well as hours researching the law and consulting with experts and others to prepare a constitutionally adequate defense. Our staff conflict defender offices, along with approximately 300 private attorneys, handle the remainder of the cases that we deal with each year. Now, because the statute provides for the minimum assistant public defenders in each of the circuits, any additional public defenders must be provided by the county. And our county partners provide funding for additional county-funded employees, that 350 number I mentioned earlier. But they also provide 96 facilities that house our circuit public defender staff across the 153 counties, and they also pay for utilities and additional local IT support. Our state budget then reflects the primary resource that we have at the state level to carry out our agency's mandate, and that's our people. Our budget is represented in this way. 77% of the budget is for personnel. That includes their salary and their benefits. 15% of our budget goes to pay the expenses of private contract attorneys who provide conflict-free representation. And it also includes the necessary experts and interpreters we use in each case. 3% of our budget covers facilities, utilities, and operational items such as Westlaw legal research. And then we have a remaining 1% for travel and training. And our travel budget essentially covers the cost of getting back and forth to see clients and also doing investigations. Our training budget allows us to provide the minimum number of continuing legal education credits each year to our attorneys, as well as for our new attorneys, we provide the Transition into Law Practice program. The remainder of our overall budget consists of the statutory payments to opt-out circuits who also provide representational services. So in sum, 93% of our budget goes directly to representational services, with the remaining 7% providing the necessary administrative support. In an attempt to meet the budget instructions for amended FY20, we were able to make reductions amounting to $1.1 million out of the $2.4 million goal. Some of these actions are listed. This is for amended FY20 and 21 on line 37.1.2 through 37.1.6 and 37.2.2. Because we had no alternatives for reduction other than in personnel, we also began a statewide furlough program, which was ended after one statewide day of furlough, which in itself amounted to about $154,000. And finally, we reduced our statutory payments to the opt-out circuits by 4% as well. With that, I stand ready to answer any questions from the committee.
All right. Thank you, Interim Director Rogers. I'm sure the committee's going to have questions. I want to, this past fall, you did have to furlough, is that correct?
We did, one day of furlough.
How many days?
1 day.
Okay. And what adjustments were made by those lawyers that were furloughed to notify the courts and their clients that they would not be available for hearings on that day?
Each of our circuit public defenders and in our division staff offices, they notified their local judges. They also notified the DAs, and they also had to notify the clients. One of the challenges that we face, though, is if someone is arrested at that time or has a proceeding already in place, they just had to manage in the office because, of course, there's speedy trial demands that are going forward. People are arrested and they have the right to appear in court. So,
but you say manage in the office. Does that mean that who would be in the office if you took furlough days, or are they staggered? Is that what you did?
They were staggered.
Okay.
They were staggered. And we took, when I say statewide, I do mean everyone from me to Terry to Cheryl, all the way to the admin in each of the offices. So they staggered it so that they would have someone to be in the office because we still have that duty.
Well, will you be able to make the total 6% cut that is recommended for FY21 without taking furlough days?
The numbers that we have now don't indicate that we could. The instruction is to hold vacancies open. We, as of January 1st of this year, had 15 active open state positions, as state funded. We had a number of county funded positions. The number that we were able to kind of engineer backwards from that is in the budget recommendation includes our personnel services number, which includes spacers, which are state-paid, county reimbursed positions. And there's a total of 58 of those. One of the challenges is that some of those positions that are reflected there have not been filled or funded since the recession.
So you're telling me then that the freezing of vacant positions amounting to $242,000 and the freezing of a secretarial position amounting to $42,000, the sum total $285,000, that money applied to the department, the entire department of how many lawyers will prevent you from having to take any furlough days next year?
The number that you have in 37.1.7, is that the number that you're referring to as far as freezing vacant positions?
No, I'm looking at line numbers specifically, 37.1.3, freezing positions that are vacant since January 1st, 2019, is $242,000. This is in your FY21 budget.
Okay.
And then I'm also seeing the only other one that's a freezing of a position or eliminating, and this is an elimination of a position altogether, is 42,000. That's how I come up. I added those two numbers together to get my number of 285.
That calculation, we have some different calculations. That was a calculation that was run off of positions, and Terry can speak to it from the personnel, as we were instructed by OPB, from the personnel service report. So that calculation that we have would be for the secretary, which the position was eliminated, and actually the deputy director position, since I'm serving as interim director.
Okay, so again, my question to you is that with those changes that are recommended in this budget of less than $300,000, and how many lawyers do you have?
And that's the first program is what you're looking at there. That's the central office.
Okay.
It would be the second program, which is the 37.2, where you come down and you see
$2 million.
That's the $2 million. So that's what we're talking about in the circuit and division offices. That's the representational side.
Okay, so freezing all that, then, and taking that money back and putting it back in the budget, you're saying that amount of money will prevent you from having to take any furloughs next year?
If we had this number of positions that would be state funded, the personnel services report that this number was generated from, according to our discussion with OPB, includes spacer positions. Those are county funded state positions as well. So they're not state funded state positions. We have a program where the counties can contract with us and they pay for those positions. So as far as our state budget, it's unclear at this point where we would get the remainder of those funds from state-funded employees.
So let's explore that, if you will, for just a minute. How many state-funded vacancies are frozen in this budget? Which means to say that there is no money, that we're taking the money out of the budget for that position and moving that money somewhere else in the budget. So you couldn't hire anybody because you don't have any money to pay for that particular position. So just to be clear, when we talk about freezing, it's not freezing because if you freeze something, it's there. I mean, but when you eliminate the position, then you're eliminating the money that's associated with it. So I want to make sure we understand the syntax. It says freezing, but freezing means it's still there. It's in the freezer. We can thaw it out later and use it. But that's not what we're doing here. So understanding that distinction, that really we're talking about the elimination of positions that are vacant. They're not existing positions. How many of those eliminated vacant positions are attorney positions that would be state funded?
I can tell you that the numbers that we have from our active list are, as of January 1st, were 15 active state-funded positions. The 15 active state-funded positions, and calculating those active positions, do not necessarily correlate to the $2 million.
How much money is that?
$690,000 for the year. Okay. I'll let Terry come on so she can speak into it. That's just in salaries.
For those 15 positions, about $690,000 with benefits is 1.1. So if those were vacant as of January 1st, so if we held them for the remaining 6 months, we'll be able to save about $335,000.
All right, I just heard 690.
690 was, yeah, well,
FY20.
for FY20, yeah.
I'm sorry?
So the positions that we have as of January 1st equals $690,000 with benefits is 1.1. So if we held them vacant for the next 6 months, it'll be about $600,000 we'll be able to save if we don't fill those statutory positions.
Okay.
And they're attorney positions, admin positions, and investigator positions.
All right, so now those are both investigator and attorney.
Attorney and
All right,
admins,
we'll
yes.
need to break those out separately, okay? How much then, is it fair to say then that of the $2.1 million that is slated for freezing positions under the public defenders, that means that the rest of that, some $1.5 million then, is contracts, that revenues that you're expecting to receive from counties to help fund attorneys at the county level?
So what would happen, and again, this is kind of two parallel calculations going on. What would happen with our county funded is if the state would not hold the money, the county would simply say, return our money to us. We're not going to fund individuals to make them state employees. So the calculation, because it encompasses that, as state money, even though it's a pass-through. The calculation here, and this is what we still have to figure out because our calculation does not line up with OPB's at this point. We don't have clarification on that.
Do you have those calculations with you, Ms. Rogers?
The calculations that OPB?
Your calculations as compared to OPB's?
We have them. We don't have them as a handout, but we have, because the one thing we don't have is we have the information from OPB that says it came from the Personnel Services report. We pulled that report in order to work backwards to try to kind of walk through that calculation.
Do you understand what I'm,
Yes.
that based upon the numbers you're giving me here today, and based upon the number that's in here, it sounds as though there's going to be a $1.5 million cut that is presumed that we would get from counties paying for those services. This money that would normally come in, that's not going to be in your budget. I'm trying to make sure that we understand what impact that's going, this budgetary change is going to have to the county level PDs, if at all. It may not be any, but I want to understand that part of it.
Well, what would happen, because the money comes to us as a pass-through, it would not be reflected as being saved by the state. So when we talk about the freezing, means that it's eliminated, so the funds are diverted somewhere else. Okay. County funds that pass through us, they can't be diverted to the state in some other form. They would come directly back to. So it would be a loss if the counties pull those funds back. So they wouldn't be here as a savings.
Okay. And then, in addition to that, I wanted to try to clarify, we have put in, this committee put in training money for your department that had not been receiving any training money, in the tune of about $340,000 yes. approximately. And this reflects a cut of that training, leaving you with about $146,000 in training money. Does that continue to pay the person that you hired to help coordinate the training, or is that money residual so that you can actually perform training? And if you can, what kind of training, how often?
It does cover solely what would be her salary. The challenge that we have is figuring out how to provide the training with that. We do have the mandatory TILT program. That's the new attorney training that we have to do, which means those individuals have to come on site. What we've been working on doing is identifying how we can deliver the training in a cost-effective way, which here would almost be a cost-neutral way. Because the state bar requires 6 hours of in-person training. So we're working with the bar to try to figure that out. We are presuming that there will not be any additional funds for that, because in our calculation of the budget, there aren't any funds for it.
So if you're unable to provide the 6 hours of continuing legal education, does that not breach the bar rules of ethics and professional responsibility?
Correct. Those individuals will no longer be licensed attorneys. The alternative would be they would have to go out and pay for their own CLE credit, and if it's 12 hours total, it's 6 hours in person.
Okay. One last thing. This committee has worked very hard, just as a couple of points of background. This committee has worked very hard in coordination with the Prosecuting Attorneys Council to ensure that any pay raises that have been given or allocated over the last 5 years have been equal, and that there's been a balance in terms of the pay scales for PDs and ADAs, or APDs and ADAs.
Yes.
And and in doing that, what we're trying to do is level the playing field so that equally good attorneys aren't shopping for jobs across the state by jumping from an ADA position to a PD position or otherwise. And so we've done that. We've been successful in doing that. The second thing we have done with this committee is we've also ensured that every juvenile court, or every circuit, and every juvenile court with a circuit, every juvenile court in a circuit has received a PD, a public defender, juvenile court attorney, as well as an assistant district attorney for the juvenile court to facilitate their role, the juvenile court's role, in overseeing children in need of services and the enhanced responsibilities that we have imposed on those courts in previous legislation. We have tried to match the numbers so that every court was equally balanced, how many positions are left that are currently vacant in the, for your PDs in those juvenile courts?
We have 9 positions that are open out of the 43. No, those are open.
And are those currently funded positions, or are those calculated into the frozen positions?
Those are positions that have not been funded at all. We have 34 that have been
Okay.
filled and
So
funded.
those have all been funded and filled, is that correct?
Yes, the 34.
All right, so we're down to 9 that are not.
Yes.
And if we don't alter the numbers here, then we wouldn't be, this budget would not account for those additional 9. And that's the last
Correct.
9 we need to fill, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Otherwise, we're just pushing an unfunded mandate down onto the local governments to try to fill that position however they can with whatever resources they can.
That is correct. There's a statutory mandate for each circuit office to have a juvenile division. And we only have 34 juvenile attorneys right now out of the 43 circuits.
Mr. Williams, sorry. Al, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Interim. I'm fascinated because you all do a yeoman's work, and we not only took the straw away, it looks like we're trying to take the shovel. I don't know how you're going to make bricks. And I don't understand. We, like Chairman said, we worked hard to level the playing field. And something's happened. You cannot convince me that when I see things like you've been elevated to interim director, and your job as deputy director is left open, that means there's 2 or 3 jobs going on that somebody got to do. It looks like it's you.
And I'm also working with JCAT's manager, our database system, too.
It is absolutely amazing to me. I used to love to go to New York and see 3-card Molly done on the streets. You never could find the P. You all, I have heard how money has been moved around, but the deal is, are you going to tell us that with the kind of reductions you're talking about, that folk that need your service is going to get the same representation they were getting in the last budget? Somebody's going to come up short. Now, a dollar ain't but a dollar. So how am I going to get $1 worth of service when you're putting 50 cents on the table? Tell me what's going to happen.
If we don't have attorneys because the positions have been held open, then we will not have attorneys representing individuals.
That I appreciate your candor. What happens when the Justice Department says we're in violation of the Constitution and here's what you're going to do? What you going to do then?
I think we will do what we've done before where there's been litigation. We'll settle and add trial attorneys and appellate attorneys and investigators.
Baffles me to know we're headed that way and we still continue to do what we're trying to do with this budget. Thank you.
One follow-up on that is the question for you is that you also have a conflict fund that we just I think it was last session, might have been the session before that we were able to fully fund so that you were not using emergency funds. They're having trouble with the mic outside, so I'm not being clear enough, but it sounds fine in here. Is everybody can hear me in here?
Fine now.
Okay. So when talking about the conflict funds, we were able to get that out so you were not having to use just administrative funds and you were not having to seek emergency funds. Tell us now what this is, because we've made great grounds in that regard, along with the juvenile court PDs, and along with also an even playing field in terms of salaries. Where are we with the conflict attorneys? And so that the public knows, a conflict attorney is someone that you have to hire because you have co-defendants that have been alleged to have committed a crime, and each individual defendant must and is entitled to representation with separate attorneys, so that they are all separately represented. And with the increased emphasis on looking at gangs are inherently a co-conspiracy, if you will, to commit unlawful acts. So in that regard, it seems to me you're going to have an increase in those conflicted cases where your agency cannot represent more than one of those individual defendants. And And so I want you to speak on that point as well, but I also want to remind everyone that we're talking about people who are accused. And we're talking about folks that, if they don't have representation, like you said on the furlough day from last year, if they don't have representation, then someone who's accused and presumed innocent sits in a venue that is designed for the condemned. That can't be the state of where we're headed in Georgia, in my opinion. But speak to the conflict.
So what we did in the amended budget and what we have rolled over into the new budget is to reduce the total amount of funds that we would be able to pay private attorneys by $360,000. That's roughly a 4.5% reduction in the total budget that was allocated for that. We know that we continually negotiate with private attorneys to take these cases. We are more challenged in the rural areas where we have to find attorneys. The rates that we currently pay attorneys, of course, are not market rates. They're public defender pro bono, essentially, rates. So this is a reduction in the rates that we will be able to negotiate with each of those individuals. What we were able to do and amend it is to go to them and say, this is the situation that we're in, work with us through this period of time. We are now rolling that into the next fiscal year, and so those discussions have begun as well in contemplation of the budget to see how we can move those. Now, as you pointed out, we expect the trends for gangs in human trafficking prosecutions to cause an increase in those cases. And they're not just adults, they're juveniles. So we're talking about multiple private attorneys, especially in some of these areas where they're outside. And we heard earlier about how with human trafficking, it can go all the way across the state. So we know that that's going to be a significant challenge for us. It's consistently been a challenge for us to secure effective, quality contract counsel.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of the committee? Ms. Rogers, yes. Sorry. Got two computers to manage here. Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to get a little more granular detail in terms of the numbers for both the salaries and the hourly rates. I'm also an attorney. It's just helpful to have that kind of knowledge. We just heard the Attorney General talking about a new position with $194,000, which I think includes salaries, so or benefits rather. Can you give us some sort of specifics of somebody starting out, what they make, and then maybe 5-10 years into practice, what they make, and then also what these hourly rates are, and are they different across the state for the attorneys that take them on?
Well, they differ in, we have kind of a presumptive rate for the complexity of the case. That's with the contract counsel. So when we're talking about what it essentially equates to is a projection of less than what it would take for hours in a murder case. If we had 45 in, 60 in, 45 out of court, but it tends to be more of a flat rate that's negotiated. For the assistant public defenders, we start off at $50,000 on the salary schedule. About 5 years in, you're not at the $60,000 rate yet, so we're looking at at 5 years, that's our highest attrition rate, that you haven't hit the 60,000 mark.
Holy cow. Okay. And can you give me some examples of what the flat rates would be? Like, say, if I took on a burglary case or a murder case, like, what are we talking about in terms of those rates?
That I will, and I know you don't want to hear this, Mr. Chairman, that I can get back to you because it would depend on where and some of the factors in the case. They're flat rates, but since they're negotiated, I would have to get you kind of a list of that. And I can't get that back to the committee.
Today?
Today, yes.
Okay. And then last question, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Are those that do the juvenile defense work on the same schedules, or are those different?
As far as the employee schedule?
Yes,
they are all on the state salary schedule if they're an assistant public defender.
Okay.
As far as the rates for contract counsel, there is a different rate for juvenile cases.
Is it lower?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
How much lower?
That will be on the sheet that I provide to the committee today. It is lower, though.
All right, Interim Director Rogers.
How much is it? Okay, so we'll get that.
Thank you very much for your public service in at least two capacities at Reverend Williams had pointed out, but,
He's got 3, really.
and we appreciate that. And please understand that we very much appreciate the hard work, the constitutional defense work that your office provides throughout the state.
And thank you, members of the committee as well. Our 800 public defenders, investigators, and administrators thank the support that this committee has provided them over the years as well.
Thank you. And I know we're running behind, but you can get the tenor of this. We'll take as much time as we need to. We have the Superior Court coming up next, and so that's going to be on it's page 68 of your big budget. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, we're going to work through the Superior Court, it's the Prosecuting Attorney's Council, then we're going to just take a short break. But I'd like to move through the Superior Court at page 68 of your big budget, if you have that, and I'll give you the page of the other in just a minute.
Good afternoon.
Section 9 of your track sheets, the section 9 of your budget. On the fiscal year 2021 budget, it's on page 5, and I think it's probably the same page on the amended.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Judge, for being here.
It's a hard act to follow. I can tell you, having been an assistant district attorney and now a judge, the public defenders in this state and the conflict defenders do an absolutely amazing job. We should be proud of their accomplishments. As to the 2020 amended, we will be withdrawing our request for the 72,845. This is at 9.3.1 for the remainder of the Griffin Circuit that was submitted before the expiration of the replacement judge in that. So we will be giving back the 72,845.
And explain that one more time as to why you said it was
We had requested,
it hasn't been filled, has it?
I'm sorry?
It hasn't been filled, has it?
Different one. There was
Okay.
there was a request for a replacement judge in the Griffin Circuit during the suspension of a judge. That suspension ended, so the request for those replacement funds were withdrawing because we asked for it before it was over. The new position, which I'll get to in 2021, has not been filled.
Okay, thank you.
That's
for that.
correct. If we're on to 2021 and 9.3.1, again, there's a downward deduction of $218,360 because of the employer contribution rate. So that actually dropped the budget by a little over $200,000. 9.3.2 is an increase in funds to analyze the cost of one new judgeship in the Griffin Circuit in FY 2021. That's the one, Representative Welch, that has not been appointed yet. Those interviews have taken place. It's my understanding that hopefully that will be shortly. The same thing as to the 9.3.3 in Gwinnett that was created, but that has been appointed, and that Judge Duncan, is actively serving as we speak. And 9.3.4 would be for the creation of the Ogeechee Circuit judge that was approved. Then there were requests, that is a request for a new judge starting July 1, 2020. Representative Welch, I don't need to tell you about that process and how those 3 judgeships were identified, but that was Ogeechee, Flint, and Cobb, where there's a request for a new judgeship in each of those. If that became effective July 1st of 2020, that would be $400,208 on each of those judgeships if they were effective July 1st of 2020. There is a request for an increase in funds for 10 law clerk positions. We currently have 34 judges throughout the state that do not have a law clerk or staff attorney. There is some language, I believe, proposed in different legislation to change that nomenclature from law clerk to staff attorney, but there are 34 judges that do not have law clerks or staff attorneys, and that would be The amount to fund that would be $694,920. There is a $13,060 request at 9.3.8 to increase funds for security protection software. They protect ransomware and other tools. As we know, with the hacks that have come, that is the basis for that. The same in 9.3.9 to provide funds for information technology security awareness training. And then into the and I just would note for your information, there are 55 step one employees between the council and the judges that are at the under 40,000 mark. If at some point those got added, as to the judicial assistants, it would be a total with benefits of 84,117, and as to the secretaries, 37,085. Then we also have the council office budget, and as you know, we're predominantly salary driven. About 94% of our budget is salary and nothing else, not buildings. We have county, most of our buildings are county funded. And as to the council, there is a request for a systems engineer position to back up our security person to make sure that we are staying on top of infrastructure maintenance, installation and upgrades. There's a request for $24,220 to provide funds for additional security software and software licensing that we need to do. $10,000 to provide funds for a security audit, and $5,000 to conduct training for IT and security personnel within the office. And those are the requests from the Council of Superior Court Judges.
Justice Gurua, thank you very much for that presentation. I want to be clear, the presentation currently does not, the budget request that's currently before us does not include the $1,000 step increase for the 55 state employees that are currently at 40,000 or less in their salary. Is that correct?
That is correct. I don't believe the judiciary was covered in that proposal.
No, the governor, some people would know, is that the governor's budget is as to the judiciary, is set by the judiciary and not by OPB as part of the separation of powers between the executive branch and the judicial branch. So this would be a new ask that you're asking for the committee to consider as we move through this process. Is that fair?
At some point, they are paid $37,085 are the salaries for all 55 of those employees.
Okay. And the total sum that would be required in order to pay them is going to be how much? 84,000? Was that what you said?
84 and 4, so it would be 88,970, if my head math is correct.
$88,097?
Yes, it needs to be split between the two programs. The 52 of them reside in the Superior Court Judges program.
Mm-hmm.
So the total cost there would be $84,117. And then 3 of them reside in the Judicial Administrative District program. So the total there would be $4,853. And that's the $1,000 plus grant.
Okay. All right. And in the past, we have funded law clerks, but not at the number that you've requested, just as a matter of re-education. And also, I would say that I know that with, at least with the Flint circuit, that circuit, the legislation that has been filed for that circuit has a start date of January 1st, which would cut this number in half.
In half.
Is that correct?
That would be true on all 3 requests if, in fact, the legislation reflected a January 1, 2021 versus a July 1, 2020.
Given the position that we're in terms of searching for money, I think that would be a fair recommendation that may come out of this subcommittee as to those particular judgeships to be postponed until January 1st of the following year, allowing us to capture those about $600,000 in monies that we could use for the Public Defender's Office.
We anticipated that might be the position of the committee.
Okay, well, that's good. I appreciate the presentation. Any questions from members of the committee? We have one. Chairman Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Judge, for being here. I just had a quick question. You know, as somebody who's been on public safety appropriations for really what seems like a short time, but it's been quite a while, we're always adding judges. Whenever the Judicial Council goes through and does the case counts, do we ever contract?
I know you did, Representative Welch. I'm smiling because I've had some lengthy discussions, and candidly, thank you, Representative Welch, for working with us. We just passed a policy through the Judicial Council envisioning that exact situation and having a rollout time to start considering the numbers where there appear by the numbers of case count to be more judges than may be necessary. That becomes somewhat complicated, as Representative Welch knows, for a number of reasons. One, when you have a two-judge circuit, you can't take a judge, at least at this point, regardless of the numbers. The other problem comes in the calculation of, well, if there's too many judges for this number of case filings, if you take one away, do they then become too few judges for those case number filings? So the new policy envisions a rollout of assessing those numbers and working with the clerks to make sure that the case counts are correct, and then reviewing those circuits or counties. For instance, my circuit's a one-county circuit, so there's not multiple counties, but envisions looking at those numbers with an eye towards evaluating if, in fact, there are circuits that have, at least on paper, too many judges, and evaluating what to do, what the solutions might be if the numbers are where they should be, and giving folks a chance to make sure the clerks are getting the counts right. Because unfortunately, because we have, as you well know, Representative Ballinger, because we have elected clerks, we have to work with them. We don't control them in making sure that the data that they're capturing is capturing everything. So yes, that has been looked at, addressed. Representative Welch has been very good about pushing us to make sure we're looking at that as well.
Okay, so just to sum up, it's something you're looking at, but no action's been taken, and there's no plan forward.
We've passed a policy addressing it, which was never in place until December. There was a policy and formula in place to look at new judgeships, but we had never addressed those circuits or counties that appeared to have more judges than they need. Now a policy has been passed by the Judicial Council to address that.
So there is a policy to actually remove judges if the case counts aren't justified.
As I recall the language, having worked on it pretty extensively, it's a review by the Judicial Council that then could recommend whatever solutions would be appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ballinger. That was, I think your sense of fiscal responsibility is the same as mine in that respect, and I appreciate that. I think that I know that the contemplation by the Judicial Council was to ensure that every circuit had at least two judges, so there would not be, you have someone in the circuit, if someone was taking a vacation or sick, that there would be someone available. So I know that the Judicial Council took a hard look at this. I know that, and by hard look, I mean it was difficult, but also examined it in detail, adopted that policy. I think that policy was adopted nearly unanimously by the council.
It was.
So it does have a 5-year rollout. Representative Ballinger's question, just so everyone is aware that this is a build-up, because many circuits have not been reporting any data because they've not been looking to add judges, so they haven't been keeping it. So there is a part of the Judicial Council is going to be looking at helping train those clerks and help them understand the case counts and assist with that so we can get accurate data going forward. I thank you for the question. I see no other questions. Judge LaGrua, thank you very much for being here and presenting on behalf of the Superior Courts.
Thank you, and thanks for all your help over this issue over the last many months. I greatly appreciate it.
Some of the people would not say that was helpful. But
I can speak at least personally, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Judge. Okay, next up on our agenda, we have a presentation by Prosecuting Attorneys Council. We'll hear them, then like I said, we'll take a break. So if I could ask them to come up. Bert, good to see you. Mark, good to see you. On your big budget, we're on page 65, and then on the track sheets, let me find it.
Thank you, Mr.
Section
Chairman,
4
and
is up.
members of the committee. With me is our CFO, Mark Williams, with the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. I'm Burt Poston. I'm the District Attorney for the Conestoga Judicial Circuit, which is Whitfield and Murray County, and also serve as the Budget Chair for the Council. There are no changes that we have in the amended budget for the current fiscal year, so I'll go straight to the 2021 fiscal year budget. There are three items, 8.2.1, 2, and 3, all under the District Attorney's part of the budget that are changes. And with your permission, I'll take those kind of in reverse order. They're similar to prior year requests. 8.2.3 is to annualize salaries for 2 assistant DA positions that were created along with judgeships in the current fiscal year. They were funded for 6 months in the current fiscal year, so those additional funds are to annualize those salaries into the new year for a full budget year. Moving up to 8.2.2, when the public defenders were up discussing juvenile court attorneys, of course, the assistant DAs. For that, there are currently 12 circuits that do not have a juvenile court assistant district attorney assigned to them. And the reason that number is different from the public defender's budget is I believe there are 3 circuits that opted out of the public defender program. So they operate in 46 circuits, we operate in 49. So over the last few years, the budget process has funded all but 12 positions, and the circuits listed there are the ones that do not have those positions currently. So that's what that funding would bring us up to 1 per circuit. The first item, 8.2.1, is funding for assistant district attorneys. As you know, over the last few years, we have come here frequently discussing the plight of the assistant DAs in terms of the turnover rates that we're seeing. We're currently on track this year to have almost 20% turnover. I think last year was right at 20% turnover. And that is very hard to sustain from replacing, filling those positions, training, getting those new people up to speed. There have been 2 compensation studies over the last few years, and out of those were identified really 3 barriers to sustaining our assistant DAs, recruiting them and retaining assistant DAs in these positions. One was that our pay scale was out of date and had some structural issues. That was corrected last year through the appropriations process. We got onto a new pay scale, which increased our base pay from $44,000 and about 400 and something, I believe, up to $50,000 as our starting pay, and just restructured the pay scale to make it a little more competitive. The other 2 factors that we run into, one is the fact that there are still a number of assistant DAs that are being paid below where they should be on the scale. If they left and we hired them back and gave them full credit for all their years of prosecution experience, we would place them back higher on the scale than they are today. And so we've tried to ask for a little bit of money each year to go at and target those that are the worst off, the most unfairly paid, and try to make some adjustments there. That's getting better, but has not been completely corrected yet. The other issue, and I think the major issue that comes into play, is the lack of consistent, steady progress on the pay scale for young assistant DAs. These folks are looking at getting married, having children, buying a house, having a mortgage, and when they make those 5-10 year kind of thought, where am I going to be, they're looking on paper at the pay scale and they're seeing where they should be in 10 years. But they're knowing from the last 10 years of experience that they might make it halfway that far or even less because they haven't seen this steady every year. We have a pay scale and we're going to fund career prosecution. That we don't want a system where you come out of law school, you work 2-3 years, get some courtroom experience, and go into private practice. You're actually going to make a career prosecution. And so I know my folks I think around the state, have kind of lost confidence in that. And I think that spills over into people that are considering coming into prosecution. They maybe know someone who's an assistant DA and ask them, and they say, well, you know, I love my job, but I don't know when I'm ever going to get a step increase on the scale again.
Bert, that'd be easy. All you top dogs just need to retire.
We're starting to see some of that.
We'll save a lot of money, and we can promote people on up.
We're starting to see some of that. I think last year when we were presenting, I pointed out that we have 10%, at least at that time, 10% of our ADAs were 60 years old or over, and probably 20% were 50 years old or older. And so we started to see some of those retirements, and I think that will accelerate, and that'll probably help. But, you know, exactly how that's going to work out.
I'm kidding. I wasn't being serious about that.
But what that applies to, though, is we have these groups where we have people coming out of law school being hired, and we have a group of these people that are probably going to retire soon, but we don't have a lot of people right in the middle because we've not been able to retain them. We had this high turnover in the middle.
Yeah, and historically, I mean, you'll recall that 5 years ago, you all came and made a presentation of both the compression problems that you were seeing, as well as the turnover issues that you were seeing as well. And you came in and you laid out a 3-year approach to that funding. That was 5 years ago. And so during that 5-year process, we've gotten some of it there, but we have not gotten anywhere near the initial request. I think it was about $8 million, and we've had to pare that back almost each year, looking to balance the budget. So I just wanted to give that historical context, that the amount asked for still doesn't even get them to where your original request was. Knowing what your turnover rates were, seeing the economy turn around, and the private sector becoming more and more appealing to individuals who might want to leave the public sector and go into the private sector jobs, especially nowadays with such a low unemployment rate in the state of Georgia. And I'm sure that's increasing the pressure, and that's why the turnover rate is actually at 20%. It dropped below that, if I recall correctly, but it seems to have gone back up.
A couple of years ago, it dropped down to about 15, but it's come back to about 20. And you're completely correct. The economy's strong, and there's opportunities out there. Attorneys in the public sector can justify working a little bit below what they would make in the private sector, but when the gap gets too big and they've got a family, and they just can't, that they have to do what's best for them and their family. So.
And the pathway towards better pay is less certain. That factors into them leaving as well.
Correct. So what the ask therefore, most of that money would go to funding a single year step increase on the pay scale for those eligible ADAs. It's not every ADA, but approximately 80% of ADAs that would be estimated to be eligible. That's still subject to approval by their elected district attorney. And then a little bit, about 10% of that is for targeted, a small number of ADAs that are significantly underpaid on the pay scale to try to get them an extra step towards where they ultimately ought to be. And again, if we do a little bit of that every year, eventually that part of the problem kind of corrects itself. But I think the only way to restore confidence that there is a career to be had as a prosecutor is to have multiple years of actually funding the pay scale. And if you're eligible for a step on the pay scale, you get it. And if we don't have that, if it's every other year that there's some funding, then the existing staff doesn't have confidence, and people that are anticipating or thinking about making a career in prosecution ask around and realize that there's just not a career to be had from a pay perspective.
So effectively this money was going to be managed locally by each local DA, and they're going to target those individuals that are in need of the adjustment in their pay scale commensurate with their time of service.
The step increases are approved at the local level. The council determines from a time period that they're eligible, but then there are additional criteria that the local DA has to do. They're actually doing their job, doing a good job, they're worthy of it, and ultimately approve those step increases.
Okay, and those are based upon times of service, so there's some qualifiers in terms of why they would get the step increase that the local DAs are going to know and understand and implement. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, the base qualifier is time, but then beyond that, each elected DA has criteria in terms of that they're doing the training and they're doing the job they're supposed to do and so forth. And so there's general guidelines, but not hard criteria because there's such a variety of different circuits and how they have to be managed.
Questions from members of the committee? Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask the same question that I asked the public defenders. It sounds like you have parity for when you start out, which is around $50,000, but I think all of us heard the issues with long-term keeping people on board and those step pay raises. So can you give us some granular detail in terms of what that looks like after like 5 years or 10 years in terms of those salaries?
So there are 4 classes in the pay scale. We operate, the public defenders and the ADAs are on the same pay scale. That wasn't always the case, but we worked together and worked with the legislature to try to get us on the same scale. So if the scale is funded evenly, then you should move up regardless of whether you're a public defender or whether you're a prosecutor. We start at $50,000. At the low end, the step increases generally are about 4%. That diminishes as the numbers get higher towards the top of the pay scale. When you move from class to class, it's a little bigger increase. You spend about 5 years in each class before you move up to the next class. So after 20 years, you should be up, the top of the scale is $110,000 salary. You've got 20 years of prosecution experience. But the reality is I've got people that have 25 years of prosecution experience, and they're still 2 or 3 steps below the top of the pay scale, because since 2008 we haven't had those steady funding for those step increases.
Mr. Poston, can you get the exact numbers for the committee?
We can. The pay scale, we get you a copy of the pay scale, and it would show you how you adjust up that pay scale if the funding is available for it.
Okay. All right. We'll look for that. You can send it to Courtney if you can.
We will get to you here shortly.
No other questions from members of the committee. Thank you for your service. Thank you for the individuals within the Prosecuting Attorneys Council and all those that are serving the state of Georgia through some difficult times in the past years, but also with a bright future ahead of us. Hopefully we'll be able to manage to accommodate as much of your budget requests as we can. I think that's the direction we've been moving in as a committee, subcommittee for the last 5 years, and I don't anticipate that changing. But you also have probably heard the budget constraints that we are seeing from other agencies and other departments and offices. So we have to factor and balance all that in the grand scheme of things to ensure that we have a balanced budget, but a budget that also works for all Georgians. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, with that, I'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll take up the juvenile courts. So I'll see you back in about 5 minutes. All right, I'm going to have to summon my committee back up here, so if they're in the hallways, they need to come on back out so we can get started and finish up. Brian, can you go? Hey, Christian, good to see you. Okay, Eric, you want to go ahead and take the mic and we'll get started. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? Nothing like gaveling judges down. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for letting us have a little recess there. What we have is, Kristen, you're going to present on behalf of the juvenile courts, is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you so much. Well, go ahead and take us down the very limited budget request that you have here. There's nothing in the supplemental, so
That's
we're going to
correct.
be on page 3 of your
3.
track sheets under section 7, juvenile courts. If you're following along in your big budget, then that's going to be page 62.
That's correct. Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I would like to introduce a couple of people that are with me
Absolutely,
today.
yes. Thank you.
Juvenile court judge for Fulton County, Juliet Scales, and
Yes.
our executive director for the council, Eric John. And once again, my name's Kirsten Wallace. I'm the budget director for the Council of Juvenile Court Judges.
Thank you, Judge, for being here today.
Okay, we'll go ahead and jump into page 3 for the big budget request for the Council of Juvenile Court Judges. We'll look at 7.1.1. This is to provide funds for the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative statewide coordinator position. This is actually a position that we've asked for the last couple of years. This position was put in by the Georgia Council on Criminal Justice Reform. It was in their report to recommend this position. So we've had this position for 3 years, and we're requesting that the funding be put into our budget. Currently, it's being funded through a MOU, which is a Memorandum of Understanding with the Department of Juvenile Justice. They pay the Council of Juvenile Court Judges for that position. So we're requesting that funding of $122,600 for that position in the council's budget as state funding. Do you want me to keep going or answer questions?
No, we can, well, so with the JDAI position coordinator, explain a little bit about what the coordinator is going to be doing for the state.
I don't know if the position is actually, she coordinates, I say she, her name's Whitney Temple. She goes out to different counties and gets them established with different programs. There's a 3-step program. She works with those counties to get them started, to have the different options for the alternatives initiative. She also works with the counties' local programs. So she coordinates, and then she's pushing that program out to the different circuits and working with the juvenile judges and coming up with the different programs.
Why is that important to Georgians?
I'm sorry.
That is a mandatory mandate that we have to provide, so it is something that's required of us to do as a council. We were just seeking to have support for that position.
And pushing alternatives to detention has what value to those youth that might be coming through the juvenile court system?
Well, the efforts being made to ensure that youth are being assessed, risk and needs assessments are being done, and appropriately being provided services. So the idea is to identify those youth and then provide those services that would be beneficial to them. So part of what we're providing through that is a detention assessment instrument. That's part of the JDAI. It's part of what's required and mandatory that we provide that. So all the counties are providing that, but this is an effort at the state level to ensure that we're given some support, that those courts throughout the state are given that support.
And the detention assessment that's being done locally, that is for what purpose and what benefit?
Well, the youth are assessed to make determination as to what their risk and needs are so that the services that are being provided are consistent with what's been identified and appropriate for them.
As opposed to being placed in an RYDC or a YDC?
Yes, as opposed to that as a least restrictive alternative.
And this is also part of our juvenile justice reform that was sponsored by Chairman Wendell Willard.
It was, yes.
Okay. And the funding for that, if not funded by state activity, would be pushed down to locals. Is that fair?
Yes. It would definitely be.
Okay. Chairman Ballinger?
Forgive me, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't this the position that was covered with federal funds, or it was covered with some other source of funds, and that's why we have not funded the position, because we actually have the position, it's just not state funded? So is there a cessation point for those federal funds?
I'm not sure about that yet.
We haven't had one. Let me tie into what you were saying, Chairman. Obviously, the benefit of this position or this work is less detention, less kids.
Right here.
Obviously, the point of this is less detention, less children in DJJ facilities. That's why they have agreed to push and help us with this. There's no cessation point, but I don't know at what point there could be a philosophical change with juvenile justice, with the new governor and the new commissioners, so I was wanting to make the position more permanent within the council to continue to work to do this, because it is being pushed mostly by the judges, by our council.
Okay, but the position, it's just, and not to kind of beat a dead horse, but it is being done. It's just being done with federal
Right.
funds. Okay, thank
Federal
you.
funds coming through juvenile justice to then come to us.
Okay, I was just, it kind of rang a bell. I was like, I think we've addressed this before, but I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
All right. Other questions for members of the committee? There is funds for the accountability salary supplements for juvenile court judges. Could you explain?
Yes, this was actually, we had discussions ahead of the request for the reductions that were part of the budget submission. We had discussions with Madam Chair Ballinger about a supplemental program for the juvenile court judges for the family treatment courts, set up similar to the Superior Court judges' accountability court supplements. So it was based on the same formula as the Superior Court with their accountability courts.
We don't have an accountability courts in juvenile courts, right? So we need to
Family
clarify.
treatment courts.
Yeah. Okay. Chairman Ballinger, you want to?
Just, because my name got used in vain, just to clarify, it was, it was to bring parity to some of our juvenile court judges. They do, just like our Superior Court judges that are involved in our accountability court, spend innumerous amount of time and hours, both in the courtroom and outside the courtroom, and it was just a recognition of that work and bringing parity to the juvenile courts. Since the Superior Courts were getting a supplement for that work, I thought that it would be fair for the juvenile courts to receive the same supplement.
And I can give you an example of a perfect circuit. We were talking about number of judges. Judge Phil Spivey in the Okmulgee Circuit has 8 counties. He's the only judge in the whole circuit. He barely makes over the $100,000 or that the state gives. He does family treatment courts. He's one of our pioneers now since Judge Stedman from Cobb retired. He's doing all that and his juvenile court, and he's getting just paid his regular salary. So we wanted to give him some assistance in pay for that. Another good example is one of the strong areas of the state is the Appalachian Circuit. We have 2 judges there, Judge Jan Wheeler and Judge Keith Galligan. And Judge Galligan is probably getting paid at a lower rate than most judges in his position. This would have been a nice addition to give him and Judge Wheeler an additional stipend to do the family court, which is very strong in that county, at least in the juvenile court, and probably the Superior Court.
How is this being apportioned? I'm trying to understand 2 things. One, the current apportionment, what's the basis and what's the monetary value that's going to be allocated to each court? I'd like to get that broken down specific to each circuit. And what amount of funds are going to those circuits? And then secondarily, is this a one-time input into the budget, or are we going to see this increasing over time for any reason at all?
I have a breakdown for the circuit, so I can get that to you. Or I think I may have already given it to Brian, but I'd be more than happy to give the breakdown for the circuits that would be receiving the funding. As for an increase over a period of time, I think it would be set up just like the Superior Court, so it would be a straight $6,000 supplement. That's what's given right now to the Superior Court judges for the accountability courts.
So does this cover all circuits then?
All circuits that currently have a family treatment court.
And how many of those?
18.
Out of 49?
That's correct.
Okay. Other questions? Ms. Clark? Let me get this light on right here.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to back up to the 7.1.1, so that I'm making sure I'm understanding everything that was discussed with Chairman Ballinger too. Currently, that $122,600 is being funded just from other sources. Mm-hmm. So if that wasn't funded with state allocation, it would still be funded. You're just wanting to make sure that it's permanent in the state budget going forward in case there was some kind of disconnect somewhere.
The memorandum of understanding with the Department of Juvenile Justice has to be renewed every year, so we just don't know. So that's why we've asked for it for the last couple of years, because we don't know if we're going to have it as of July 1st of the next fiscal year.
Okay.
All right, so back to the questions about the accountability courts. If I understood you correctly, we've got 18 circuits currently, and we're talking about a $6,000 supplement, is that correct?
That's correct.
So my math works out to be 108,000. So why are we? Tell me what's the difference? The other $106,000.
That's, we would be paying $6,000 per judge in that circuit. So some of the circuits have more than one juvenile court judge.
And do the juvenile court judges rotate in some way around these family alternative courts, or?
Yes.
So not one is designated? Or are they all doing it? Because the issue is I don't want to, we're not going to pay judges that aren't actually doing the court work. You know, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
If you have a judge who said, look, I'll take this on and it's my responsibility, then fine. That's understandable. But we're not just going to give blanket $6,000 to every single juvenile court judge within those circuits if only one is doing that kind of courtroom work.
No, every one of our judges that's designated as a family treatment court judge is doing family treatment. They go to the seminars, so we wouldn't have a circuit where we would be paying someone who wasn't doing the family treatment courts.
Because you can understand that looking at those numbers,
oh sure,
you know that doesn't make sense. And that it would be helpful to know, I think, going forward, because once we take a step in this direction, we have to anticipate that we're going to be, looking at the rest of the circuits. So, 31 other circuits to do that as well. So, knowing how many judges will be involved in that, what our long-term payout could potentially look like, is important, because I don't want to go down. I don't want to open this door and then have judges upset that they didn't get through the first cut. That wouldn't be fair to them. Wouldn't be fair to the system. It wouldn't be fair to the other judges that are in line to hopefully also receive that benefit.
And that's a good point, because we have, as Judge Scales reminded me, we have 4 circuits now on standby. They've I think completed their certification, and they were going to move forward, but with the funding cuts, prospective funding cuts in accountability courts, there may be a delay, and we may not be getting those 4. So, point well taken, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and Chairman Ballinger.
And just for kind of point of interest, I don't know what the procedural thing would be. That's the way we handled Superior Courts. Was if we gave it to one judge in the circuit, then we gave it to all the judges in the circuit. Mr. John, I know you're the director of the Council of Juvenile Court Judges, and we have increased, particularly the implementation of Families First. We have implemented a lot of additional duties, and Judge Scales, maybe you would speak to this. How are juvenile judges, and particularly in light, y'all are kind of our last defense. Y'all oversee all the dependency cases here in the state of Georgia. Y'all oversee all of those. With all of the budget cuts from the Division of Family and Children Services, as well as some of the kinship care aspects that are being implemented through as a result of Families First, can you speak to how juvenile judges are adapting to meet that need and that high demand?
Well, I mean, we're continuing to do the work, but with a lot of challenges, as you've alluded to. There's anticipation that those services that we're able to provide currently are not going to be able to be provided throughout because of some of those cuts. Family First is in place, or it will be rolled out. It has not been rolled out yet. It has about, I believe, next year anticipated. So that, of course, with that will come more. Family treatment court is one aspect of what the juvenile court judges are doing, but also we tend to look at what we do as accountability court, period, because a lot of the cases, in fact, all of them, are to be reviewed and considered much more frequently than any other class of court. And so while we may not have a new filing, we are mandated through statute to certainly review and consider those cases on a more regular basis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Ballinger. Judge Steele, thank you very much for being here. Kristen, thank you. Eric, you got workouts or you got a Bill? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And this goes along, we started down that conversation but never finished. And I guess it's kind of congruous to what Chief Justice Melton said the other day during budget hearings, that really big picture, not looking at light items, that these accountability courts, in your case, the family treatment centers overall, that's going to be a lower cost per defendant, correct? Would that be safe to say?
You said a lower cost?
Lower, well, certainly than incarceration or a different path forward.
Certainly would make a different path forward. The idea is to look at the number of children that are served through those family treatment courts as well,
right,
as the participants.
Okay. And I guess it just bothers me that these other 31, that because of your zip code, you get a lot better chance at rehabilitation. So I guess that's not a budget question, just more of a comment.
Yeah.
That
No, I mean, that's going back to when we looked at juvenile justice reform, the average cost of incarceration, I think, and I say incarceration, but detention of juveniles was about, what, $90,000 per year, $91,000 per year, and of course that was so 3 times more than an adult, effectively. And because the nature of services, the nature of the facility, and the distance of the facilities that are located throughout the state, there's a discussion about closing down one of the facilities in Albany. Does the council have any comments on the impacts of that to juvenile court judges in the Southwest Georgia area? Do y'all have any comments or thoughts about that impact?
Sumter, I believe, is what the commissioner had told me. That's down in Americas. Judge Jones, Lisa Jones, who's our president there, and I know Chairman Ballinger will remember she testified about the lack of resources. That's going to be difficult for her to deal with. She's going to have to find out first, where is she going to send these kids? Granted, from what was stated, I think in one of the budget hearings, it's 150 capacity, and it's got like 56 kids in there. But those are 56 kids that she and her court are going to have to find out where are they going, and then how difficult will it be for the parents to get to the families. So, and this transporting, which is not very easy in the juvenile court system. The family keeps coming up. The family court, treatment courts is important because they think the philosophy in the literature is that if you make the family hold, you're making the child hold, and it's better for the children. And that's why family treatment courts are the main accountability courts that the juvenile courts are getting into, and those are usually your abuse and neglected children.
Thank you. Judge, thank you very much. Kristen, thank you. Eric, thank you very much for your presentation. Seeing no other questions, well, Heath, you're okay, right?
Yeah, that was just left on.
Okay. All right, good. Then we'll proceed on to our next
Thank you.
Next item. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the Supreme Court. We have our Chief Justice Melton, presiding Justice Nomnius, and I see Justice Boggs is with us too. Regina and T, thank you for being here as well. On your track sheet, I think it's going to be a page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you identified, we do have presiding Justice David Nomnius with us. Justice Michael Boggs will largely be responsible for presenting on behalf of the AOC and the Judicial Council. He walked up here to make sure we didn't drop anything. We also have T. Barnes, our Clerk of Court, and Regina Jones, our Fiscal Operations Officer. Always want to thank you for your attention to our branch of government. And we're always grateful for the work that you do on behalf of the judiciary. We, of course, thank you for the building. It's particularly appropriate that I have the opportunity to thank you as we sit in the original Supreme Court for the state of Georgia. Just a quick reminder of what's in that building. We have the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, the Office of Bar Admissions, the Office of Reporter of Decisions, and the Business Court will be on the 3rd floor. We do hope that you will remember to show up on Wednesday morning, 7 o'clock, set your alarm. We want to show you around, and also hope that you will be able to make it to the dedication on February 11th, where Justice Clarence Thomas will be speaking. Going to our actual requests, our requests are largely operational. In the supplemental budget, our first request is basically for copiers. In the new setup in the building, we have one copier in each of the chambers. The amount for that for that request in the supplemental is $18,210. A lot of our requests are cyber related, especially as it relates to cybersecurity. I mentioned in our joint House and Senate meeting that in one particular 24-hour block of time, the Office of Bar Admissions, which our IT department serves, had 8,000 attacks in one 24-hour period. and of course you remember, excuse me, of course you remember that the Administrative Office of Courts had been attacked earlier in the year. And so we jumped on that issue immediately within our court. And so you see requests for event trackers endpoint detection services in the amount of $9,250. That, as I understand it, in IT world, keeps anything that gets into the system from actually running and spreading and operating within the system itself. And then we also have a request for a web application firewall, which blocks anything from entering the system in the first instance. Those are in the system right now and are operating. That requested amount is for $10,230. You see the Westlaw research bill in the amount of $6,000, and the request for printing, stationery, and signage in the new building in the amount of $25,379. Those are our requests for the supplemental budget. Would you want me to keep going, Mr. Chairman, or would you have questions on anything I've presented so far?
Just wanted to know if you could renegotiate those online research fees with LexisNexis.
Our clerk of Kurt does a good job of pushing pretty hard on that, and I think she'll tell you that's the best deal we can get.
Okay. That's all, thanks.
Okay. On the big budget, you'll see a lot of those same items repeated. The copier in the amount of 36 annualized out, the cyber event trackers and the web application firewall, the Westlaw, all those are continued from the supplemental budget. The next item is the personnel services for mileage. This is the item for Justice Benham. As you know, Justice Benham has announced his retirement at the end of the month, beginning of March. If the governor appoints a justice to the court who qualifies for that mileage reimbursement, we'd need money as a placeholder to accommodate the mileage reimbursement. And that request is in the amount of $10,591. The other item in response to the cyber focus is the IT cyber network security analyst. This would also help support some of the increased work that our IT folks are doing. Again, our IT department supports our court. It also supports the Office of Bar Admissions, and that's important when we operate the bar exams, conduct the bar examinations, all the specialized test taking that takes place on laptop computers. There's a whole protocol for how you dumb down the computer, upload the test taking software so you can't access the internet while you're taking the test, and we do all the support for that. And then also all the trial court judges across the state, some 4,000 have reporting, essentially conflict and ethics reporting that they upload to our system, and our IT department does all the support for that. So in addition to that, we want to have an increased focus on the cybersecurity, so we're asking for a position, and that you see that amount being provided there. The next two requests are somewhat new. In our conversations largely with the Senate, they had been asking how can we and the Court of Appeals share services, and as you know, there's an audit that was done looking for opportunities to share services. The first request that we have is a joint request with the Court of Appeals for a personnel manager. We do not currently have an HR personnel manager, neither does the Court of Appeals. This model follows the model that we have already with the Office of Reporter of Decisions. The way that works is there is an Office of Reporter of Decisions that serves both the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals. It's under the Supreme Court, but we both go to that office as needed, and they serve both of us without any conflict or questions about priority, and we think that can work with an HR personnel position as well. And you see the amount requested there for $56,000. And similarly, you see the payroll coordinator, and this would be responsible for the reconciliation process and semi-monthly payments, manage deductions and payments to IRS and Department of Revenue, and items along those lines, and teamwork's included. The next to the last item you see is the increased rental space for the new building in the amount of $118,751. And then, of course, the pass-through, our formula bill for the National Center for State Courts in the amount of $6,568.
Okay,
I'll pause there for any questions you might have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice. So on the rental expenses, the amount of the $118,751, is that net of your former rental expenses, so that we can compare what you're paying currently for the current facility versus the newer, nicer facility?
That's the additional, yes, the additional delta.
That's the additional amount? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. And then you brought this up at the very beginning. So in terms of historical context, we've gone from this room, the Supreme Court has gone from this room to the building now across the street.
That's correct.
Not bad, not bad.
Not bad. As I understand, this original building housed everything in state government, all the agencies, and
that's right.
We're all housed under this one roof.
So what you're saying is it's just been a long time in coming, right?
It's exactly what I'm saying.
Well, thank you for your service. The questions about the payroll coordinator position, that position, is that also being shared with the Court of Appeals? Is
Yes,
that right?
That would be a shared position as well.
And we appreciate, the committee appreciates the work that you all have done to try to coordinate your activities where you could, just to streamline efforts and to reduce costs to the taxpayers. And then lastly, what is your current comparison of written opinions that the court is putting out, that our Supreme Court, Georgia Supreme Court, is issuing relative to other states in the United States?
We are still by far one of the top 2 or 3 in terms of volume. And I think that's largely driven by the fact that we hear the murder cases. Murder cases account for about 60% of our caseload. Other courts would send their murder cases to the intermediate court. Other states would do that. And so, unfortunately, we still have a lot of murders in this state, and we're dealing with those, plus all the constitutional and weighty cases that still need to be addressed. But we're happy to be busy.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Any other questions from members of the committee? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And you said that Justice Clarence Thomas from the United States Supreme Court would be here on February 11th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Where will he be speaking?
He'll be speaking at the dedication service that begins at 10:30.
Okay. And where is he from in Georgia?
He's from Pinpoint, Georgia.
Pinpoint, Georgia.
Suburb of Savannah.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's an honor and a esteemed privilege for him to come and do that for us here. And of course, coming back to his home state, that's fantastic. I hope to be there. All right, we'll move on to the Judicial Council and ask that Ms. Cynthia Clanton and Justice Mike Boggs come forward and present. Judicial Council is on page 57 of your big budget, and then Brian's handing out just a little additional information for you on for your consideration. Let me get the page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to be before you. I'm Mike Boggs. I serve on the Supreme Court. Of course, one of my administrative responsibilities is to chair the Judicial Council Standing Committee on the Budget. I'm hearing that in that capacity today, and I'm pleased to introduce Cynthia Clanton, the Director of the Administrative Office of the Court, that does just such a fine job for us, and Malia Wilson, who is the Budget Director. And so they'll assist to the extent necessary. We have one request in the enhanced budget. You will recall that through the years, the Judicial Council has myriad obligations relative to the budget, including the JQC, which we'll talk about in a moment. But included in that is to administer grant programs for projects that have been recommended by certain committees. 2 years ago, the Justice for Children Committee of the Supreme Court of Georgia recommended a Kinship Care for Families grant program, and I was before you last year asking for $750,000 to administer that program. You all were very kind and offered up $375,000, and that work has now been performed in the 6 months of the first part of the fiscal year through a grant to Atlanta Legal Aid. Steve Gottlieb is here from Atlanta Legal Aid, is in the back, and through Georgia Legal Services. Their director, Rick Ruffalo, is here as well. Thank you, gentlemen, both of you, for being with us today. As you will recall, the Kinship Care Program was intended to provide assistance to relatives, non-parent relatives that are raising their relatives. Part of that was to avoid those children ultimately ending up in foster care programs. And as we talked to you a year ago about this program, the idea was really to try to help some of these children across the state of Georgia. I need not remind you, but I will. 43,000 grandparents are raising their grandchildren in this state. You will also note that roughly 13,718 kids are currently in foster care in Georgia. And so one of the really beauties about the Kinship Care Program was that it would provide these holistic services to these children across the state. And so I'm pleased to report to you that after a 6-month period of time, we are going to report the following data to you, and I've handed out a flyer that is headed Civil Legal Services to Kinship Care Families. And it will relate to you that over this 6-month period of time, and with the money that's not always completely been expended yet, we have touched 623 kids through this program, opened up 393 new cases. Of those, 289 were for grandparents raising their grandchildren. 70% of these cases involve formalizing legal custodial relationships, adoptions, guardianships, and such. 79 counties were touched, so this is not a Metro Atlanta program, it is a statewide program, but in those 6 months, children were served in 79 counties across the state. 75% of those cases were outside the 5 Metro Atlanta areas. Importantly, I think you should know, and this is consistent with what we represented we would be able to do with the appropriation, was that we think, avoided $2 million over that 6-month period of time in foster care stipend avoidance. And so this flyer outlines all of those particular topics for you. We're here asking for this year as an enhancement in the amended budget, the additional $375,000. When we think about ROI on taxpayer dollars, as we've thought about in criminal justice reform, but in other areas as well, you think about what kind of return on investment are Georgia's taxpayers getting on these expenditures, and I think you'll find that this program is working very well, not only for the children that are being served, but it's working very well for saving taxpayer money. Let me give you one example, just one, of what Georgia Legal Services and Atlanta Legal Aid have been able to do with this money, and I'm going to give you the story of Darren. Darren is a 79-year-old man in middle Georgia who had raised his children, settled into retirement. In September of 2019, he was called upon to pick up his 4 grandchildren from a temporary foster home. The children were ages 6 to 11. 2 of them had disabilities. Darren doesn't drive. The children were placed into foster care when one parent left and the other was arrested. In the past few months, Georgia Legal Services helped Darren obtain guardianship for the 4 children so they could get enrolled in school and to receive benefits like Medicaid. They also worked to get financial supplement called Grandparents Raising Grandchildren to help with the new financial burdens Darren faced in raising his 4 grandchildren. Darren has enrolled these 4 children in school. He's getting the needed medical treatment for allergies and glasses. And more importantly, they're all together and they're being cared for by family and not implicating or impacting the foster care system in Georgia. So that is just one example of what is being done with the money that you appropriated last year. And so we're asking in the enhanced budget for a $375,000 enhancement, and I think that's section 6.4.1 of your tracking sheets. So I'm happy to answer questions about the Kinship Care Program, but we're real pleased with the work that's being done, and owe a great deal of gratitude, I think, to Atlanta Legal Aid and Georgia Legal Services for administering this money in such a productive way.
Just a few questions and points. I do want to thank Atlanta Legal Aid and the Georgia Legal Service Program, as well as the Judicial Council for their work. This is noble work, and it does have a market impact, as you have indicated with the information you provided. I point this out, and I want to underscore this. This was a sort of a request that the committee took on faith in making the grant last year, even though it was only half of the amount of money that was requested. And that's because the committee thought it was important to see what the return on investment is before fully funding the request. Clearly, it has had a pronounced effect across the state of Georgia, and I commend everyone that's worked on that program. That being said, I also wanted to understand that ultimately with the supplemental budget, plus our previous year's budget, the supplemental budget, and then the FY21 budget, aren't we looking at $1.12 million total for the kinship care program? Is that, no?
No.
It'd just be $750,000?
It'd be $750 total. The $375 carried forward from last year's budget and ensuing budgets, and this $375. So it'd be $750 total, which we think would ultimately result in an annualized savings of $4 million in avoided foster care per diems.
And then have you looked at, and probably not, but because I haven't asked the question before, but it occurs to me that you would have I think we have a beeping, somebody's batteries are going out. Okay, I'm going to let someone in the back figure that out.
Blood pressure monitor.
But yeah. If there's some other reason we need to vacate the room, that would be helpful to know as well.
Yeah, indeed.
No, what I was going to get to is that naturally when you start these programs, you're going to have an initial return on investment that should be high. You expect it to be high because it's the first opportunity, it's the first wave, and so you have that initial influx of folks into a system or into programming. But as you address the kinship care needs, which is oftentimes just kind of a one-time, one child, one grandparent, or one grandparent and then a few children along with it, their needs have been taken care of. So I also wonder if there's not going to be a pullback, if you will, in terms of individuals to be served. That over time, after you've done this for a year or two, that you have reached out to the state and you've addressed many of those families. But how many families are we projecting that we're going to affect? And that's hard to know because you just don't know when you're going to be in a position where a next of kin is going to take over for the parenting of children. That's hard to know, but at the same time, it's helpful to know because what we're doing is we're programming money into a budget that is essentially forever there unless we pull it back. And so projecting that is helpful to know, but I also raise that with you going forward, but I also raise it with the committee just so we have some history and context. Should I not be here or should someone else take over the committee, that you have that history. But secondarily, I know that you've heard Justice Boggs of the strains we have on other departments and other offices in this particular budget, and that I hope you understand, I hope the council will understand that as we go through and look at these programs, we're going to have to be making decisions that are that appropriators have to make. They're tough decisions. Naturally, you'd like to help every program that you can, but we have to be wise and fiscally responsible with the taxpayers' money. And we also have to be cognizant of the budget constraints we have and applying that money in those areas that have the highest priority from a legislative perspective. So I share that with you only just to ask those questions and make those points. Other members of the committee have anything to add? Chairman Ballinger.
Thank you, Justice. I appreciate that. With regards to the kinship care, can you speak to the number? One of the things that we're facing, and as the chair rightly pointed out, is a lot of other agencies in the state of Georgia are seeing reduced budgets. One of those being hit particularly hard is the Department of Family and Children, Division of Family and Children Services. Can you speak to the kind of the savings to them as far as caseworkers, case management? I know one of the things that we're losing is 127, basically CPS workers. So by avoiding that and kind of, placing these children with kin, can you speak to that and kind of what the anticipated savings from that perspective would be?
I wish I could, but I don't know what anticipated savings you'd see in other agencies, nor the overlap but I do know that much of the work that is being done by Georgia Legal Services across the state through this program is being referred to them. In fact, there are flyers. I didn't give you a copy of one, but there are flyers that DFACS workers are providing to those families that are in need of some of these types of legal services. And so I know they are a great referral service. I hope, frankly, I hope we experience the anticipation of the chairman that maybe there's a mass influx and that these things kind of go away after a while. But with the fast-growing state that we are, I think you're going to continue to see a lot of kids living in poverty, a lot of kids that are having parents that are either incarcerated or have issues that can't raise them. So to what extent there will be ancillary savings in additional agencies, I can't answer, Representative. I'm happy to look into that and talk to those folks in those agencies about how we might be able to fit doing some of their work through the Kinship Care Program to the extent they can.
And could you just speak briefly about educate, as Chair of Juvenile Justice, I kind of work in this world, all the time, but a lot of committee members may not know kind of the benefits to the children and kind of just the holistic better outcomes that they get by being placed with family members. Can you speak to that just briefly?
Well, I can speak to the monetary benefits, the psychological, holistic benefits. I could let someone either from Georgia Legal Services or Atlanta Legal Aid speak to. I think it goes without much explanation that children are going to be better off with their relatives than they are in the foster care system. That said, one of the things we've experienced is just simple things like getting children on SSI to the extent that they need those legal services to accommodate them, getting them signed up for private, not state implicated, but private health care insurance programs that are available to them, but they need some guidance, some sophistication to go about getting signed up. So special education programming, IEP programming for some of these children that requires a guardian or a custodian that is engaged in their life is very important to these children and will have long-lasting effects, I think. And so I think ultimately, in the end of the day, the monetary benefits notwithstanding, the benefits to the children are huge. I'm happy to have someone from Georgia Legal Services, Steve or Rick, speak to this if you'd like, Madam Representative. But thank you, and thank you for your leadership on these issues as well. I know how important juvenile justice is to you. The children, of course, are very important to me as well. My wife is a kindergarten teacher in public schools in South Georgia, and we know some of these issues firsthand. So thank you for the question.
Vice Chair Rogers.
Really not a question, more a comment on your comments.
Yes.
Justice Boggs, do you think it probably would be fair to say that we're sitting here looking at a bunch of numbers, but there's all kinds of intangible benefits that aren't showing up on the papers?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, talk to any of these children that are being raised by their family, and that grandparent, maybe Darren, the 79-year-old that I spoke of, is actually going to ball games or going to PTA meetings and doing things that a parent would be doing. That sort of engagement in a child's life is immeasurable, and so I appreciate you pointing that out, but I agree.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
One last question. Also in the Judicial Council's budget was line item 6.4.2, increased funds for one business analyst position. Could you explain the request there if it's still there?
I can. The good news today is that we're withdrawing that request. We have, and I'll give full credit to Cynthia Clanton, in deciding how we might accommodate the new Judicial Council policy on workload assessment, data analyst studies, and such. We have coincidentally realized we've got a new opening in another division of the AOC whose salary is almost exactly the same as what we're asking for here, and we can repurpose that position without asking for any additional funding. We do want you to know that we take very seriously, Mr. Chairman, your concerns as expressed by and adopted by the new Judicial Council policy on workload assessments, that it has not gone lost on me when I was a legislator and also as a judge that adding a judge is a very important proposition, a very expensive proposition. I know when I was in the legislature it was about $1 million to add a new judgeship in Georgia. And so conversations, though, about the quality of the data that goes into the workload assessments that drive the recommendations from the Judicial Council, which there are many every year for you all to consider. On the flip side, also has to take a look at maybe underjudged circuits and deciding whether the data that reflects those circuits are underjudged is accurate. And so what the Judicial Council did in adopting this new policy was said that the AOC would provide technical assistance to clerks, that we will actually be, this person that we hire will, we hope, maybe be a clerk or former clerk or speak clerkese and be able to understand how important it is to ride into the circuits and teach clerks and do on-site training, and also ensure the accuracy of the data that we're getting that you ultimately are relying on for decisions that are very consequential.
So that work can still be done with this internal administrative shift that you've just identified?
It will be.
So we can eliminate that. So it'd also be fair to say then that between the requests that you're looking for cost savings wherever you can find them, because this kinship care program is so important to children in the state of Georgia. Is that fair?
It's absolutely fair, Mr. Chairman. We recognize that we play a part in the state's economy as well, and that the Judicial Council, as the courts and other agencies, understand what's going on in executive branch budgets right now, and we want to be a team player.
Well, I appreciate that,
Yes,
given our budget. So that's very kind, very thoughtful of you. I appreciate the extra introspective look of your budget, and I'm sorry for the loss of the position and the individual, but at the same time, we're appreciative of how you're repurposing that position. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any other questions?
That's all from us.
Lastly, I will also state that the Judicial Council budget includes the Judicial Qualifications Commission, and I would like to now introduce Chuck Boring, former Chief Assistant DA in Cobb County, who is the new Executive Director of the Judicial Qualifications Commission, to present his budget.
Thank you, Justice Boggs. We have before you, each member has an outline that Mr. Boring has put together on behalf of the commission. This is a budget outline, and this would be a slight add over what we have in the current budget. If I'm correct, it's about $200,000 more.
That's correct.
So you'll see a number at the bottom that is the total inclusive number of just over $1 million. But the current budget has it set for just over $800,000, so that's the difference you'll see. And this is at section 6.5 of your track sheet for 2021. I know that there were some supplemental requests, but you can make them, but they are a little late in terms of our timetable, but you can certainly make them, Mr. Boring, and we welcome you. I would like to just remind the council and the public that this body, this committee, took on the hard look at the Judicial Qualifications Commission about 5 years ago, examining how money was being spent, where resources were actually being applied, where office space was or was not, where files were being kept. And after a thorough vetting of the interim leadership at the Judicial Qualifications Commission, it was very transparent to this subcommittee that there was need for two things. One, overhaul. Number two, dedicated funding, because no one had come to me and asked for budget amounts for this particular commission during my tenure, and it was only after some cajoling that we were able to get some folks to come talk to us about those numbers. With that said, that's why we're at the $800,000 level that we are. And furthermore, just to underscore for the public that the purpose of this commission is extremely important to maintaining the integrity, the faith of the public in our judicial system, so much so that the previous handling of it was alarming, pardon the pun. What we have now is that we have a new director. We're anticipating that there will be good scrutiny of both the ethics and the imposition of of what it means to be in the role of a judge throughout the state, and that you can't monitor that. And in fact, constitutionally, the JQC is the only one that monitors the activities, if you will, of judges outside of the General Assembly through an impeachment process. So with that, our watchdog agency looking over the judiciary is here, and we're glad to have you, but I wanted to provide some context for members and the members of the public that may not know what the Judicial Qualifications Commission does. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Justice Boggs, for everything except being so tall, so I have to move the microphone down. As you said, our agency regulates the conduct within the entire judicial branch. We conduct investigations and hearings into allegations of judicial misconduct, and I think one other thing that's very important that I don't think is talked about enough is we attempt to provide education and direction for judges and members of the judiciary concerning ethical obligations pursuant to the Code of Judicial Conduct and applicable statutes, which even goes into campaign finance and things of that nature. So Yeah, I've been before many of you before here down at the Capitol. That was in my role as a prosecutor for about 19 years. I was down here on several occasions, not talking about budgets and numbers. I've been the director of the JQC for not quite 2 months. So in that time, I knew that one of my weaknesses would be the personnel budget type of aspect of this job. So the trial stuff, the investigation stuff, I can handle that. I knew I needed to dig into this immediately, and the result of that was the new presentation of an amended ask for fiscal year 2021. Just as a bit of note about what type of work the JQC does and the volume of work that we do, there are over 1,500 judges in Georgia. I know Cynthia provides numbers and statistics and has it at that number, but every session and with every municipality that adds a judge, it grows. So I can't give you an exact number, but I know it's more than 1,500. We regulate and deal with every level of court in Georgia, be it from the Supreme Court to the Court of Appeals, Superior Court, State Court, probate, municipal court. That includes full-time and part-time judges. That includes people who take on the role of judge who may not even be an attorney in other more rural jurisdictions. We also regulate the activity of candidates for judicial office. So you take that number of judges in the state, anybody who runs for judge, we have to regulate their conduct as well. That implicates campaign finance laws. Additionally, in some form and in sometimes, we actually regulate the conduct of law clerks, staff attorneys, and other staff that are under the direct supervision of judges in this state. So that's a little bit about, kind of generally what we do and the workload we have. Looking back, since the legislature reconstituted the Judicial Qualifications Commission, I provided some numbers for complaints that we get on a yearly basis, and so the ones that we've gotten since then. And I think the reconstitution of this agency has really benefited everyone for providing different layers of supervision, different layers of checks and balances, and a detailed process that we undergo when we institute these actions. Since it has been reconstituted, per the statistics I provided you, in 2017, we had 407 complaints. That included 2015 and 2016. During the transition, we don't have any record of the number of complaints. My assumption, because of the transition, is that some of those older complaints kind of were stagnant until 2017. 2018, we had 363 complaints. This past year in 2019, which I was director for the last month, we took in 525 complaints of alleged judicial misconduct. So that's a 45% increase in complaints from 2018 to 2019. And that can be due to a myriad of factors, be it our new website, or it makes it more easy for people to actually file complaints. I think some of these issues being in the media may contribute to that, but also I think the number of judges and just the awareness. Additionally, for 2020, we're already on pace, and I know it's a small sample size, but per this month, how far we've gotten, we're on pace for 546 complaints. And I know the Judicial Council's ad hoc committee dealing with sexual harassment has released their report about dealing with it, allegations of sexual misconduct within the judiciary. And in that, if you've read the report, you know that the person or the people who are going to be responsible for addressing those from a disciplinary standpoint, when it deals with judges, it's going to be the JQC. So we expect with that, we may see an uptick in complaints and workload as well. I provided some comparisons with other states just to show the workload that we have versus the workload and budget and staff that other states may have. The first slide or first page that I have included includes our 525 complaints. We have 3 staff members at this point, myself, a staff attorney who is 1 year out of law school, and a budget of $827,000. For instance, looking at a couple of states that have a similar number of complaints, the state of Louisiana had 543 complaints in 2018. They have a staff of more than 10. They actually have their JQC broken down into 3 different branches, and they have a budget of $1.9 million. Michigan has 478 complaints, or had 478 complaints. They have a staff of 8 and a budget of $1.2 million. Looking at the next page, I added a couple of states that actually had many less complaints than Georgia. If you look at New Mexico, they had 179 complaints with a staff of 7 and a budget a little bit more than we have. Massachusetts, many fewer complaints, a higher level of staff, and a small, very, very small amount higher budget. And then if you look at a couple of other states, the last slide I've included, these are people with states with significantly less complaints. Arkansas, 224 complaints with 6 staff. Nevada, 189 complaints, 4 staff, and a budget of $930,000. So I say that just to kind of put it into context that I've done my research on this and why I'm asking for what I am asking for. How did we get here, and what are we doing to adapt in the fiscal year 220 as we get up to 221? We had several large investigations once this JQC was reconstituted in several different areas of the state, including the city of Atlanta. And those required at the time the director, who was in private practice before, to go in and retain outside counsel to assist with the preparation and trial of these matters. That's one of the reasons I think we've done everything we can to make ends meet. Looking at this, what are we doing? To start with, when I came on as director, I took a pay cut from what the prior director was making, and even though we had discussed with the commission going back up to that, I've agreed to, at a minimum, until the end of this fiscal year, I'm not asking to go back up to that. I'm going to keep the salary I have, which will reduce the budget for 2020 so we can make ends meet as we get to June 30th. Also, as I think many people in the state are going to have to do, is you have to make some difficult decisions. So what I've done is I've had to reduce and look at reducing the salaries or positions and structure within our agency. We have a staff attorney. That is the only other attorney in the JQC. He is a first-year law student, or a 1 year out of law school. Great guy, but he doesn't have that experience when I'm away doing something else like this if a call comes in to triage it. What I am seeking to do in 2021 is to take that position at that same pay and get an experienced attorney for that. What else are we doing to make ends meet at going toward the end of the year? I think that my ability, having been a trial attorney for years now, we're not going to have to spend as much money hiring outside counsel to come in to handle trial matters or investigations on that part. So I think that will be a savings. However, to do what I think this commission is charged with, we need to add personnel. So that's my humble request. In this case, see, I'm still a trial attorney, I say in this case. In this request, I'm asking to increase our staff from 3 to 5. The position, first of all, being the staff attorney we have becoming a trial counsel position. At the same rate, the same pay that we have for that position, and then adding 2 staff attorneys. These staff attorneys would be paid $65,000 a year, would be younger attorneys that would come in and especially help on the triaging, the management of the cases on the front end, and helping with the education to all these levels of judges. I've looked at ICGA's calendar already this year, and for the year, there are trainings and presentations that we need to take part in and make sure we are up to date on everything to present monthly, weekly. There is training to be done, and we need to have the personnel to do that in addition to being able to handle all the investigations we have. Additionally, to train up these younger attorneys as well to help with these investigations. I can tell you right now, we have investigations in every part of the state, north, south, east, west, the city of Atlanta, and it's going to take some time and it takes some digging, because not only do we want to put the work in to root out misconduct, we also want to make sure we get it right. And that takes effort, and that takes crossing your T's and dotting your I's, and it takes experienced people to be able to do that. We also have an increase in our budget, not only with adding 2 positions, but adding extra funds for investigations, because I believe the heart and soul of this particular agency is having investigators and be able to employ investigators to go out and do that. And I would just comment that I think our agency does do a bit of extra cost savings for the state of Georgia as well, in that we employ retired law enforcement to assist via contract with these investigations. That way we save the taxpayers money by not having to we don't have to pay health insurance, we don't have to pay retirement. These people are already drawing that, and we're paying them on a contract basis, which results in savings to the people of the state of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Director. You had mentioned the the proposed salaries for the staff attorneys, does that include the fringe and benefits?
No, the fringe is in addition to that.
Okay. What about the case manager? What's the salary?
The case manager, what we've done there, it's now at a $70,000 rate. I am reducing, well, my in this budget is being reduced to $55,000. So I'm actually cutting at that point.
Okay. All right. And then how much in the 2021 budget, does that reflect the change, the personal change you made in your own salary?
It still has that in the salary. That same amount is still in there. So at some point, I would ask to go back up to that, but that's something I'd be willing to do to make this commission work if necessary, is to keep it there.
All right. And then are you sharing services with the Judicial Council and cooperating with them to save in terms of your HR management and other things like that?
I'm sorry?
Are you using the Judicial Council to assist you with
Yes.
HR, with financial assistance, with
Yes.
housing?
The AOC provides, I mean, I don't know how to do any of that, and they do a great job. I've sat down with Cynthia, with Malia, with Drew. That'll probably bug the heck out of them over these 2 months, wondering, what does this number mean? What does this code mean? I have no idea. Luckily, they're there for me and provide that service.
Okay, thank you. Questions from members of the committee? Chairman Ballinger.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. I appreciate your presentation. I was just wondering, out of the 500 and, let's see, how many did you have? 525. How many reprimands and how many judges did you remove any judges that year from the 525 complaints that you received?
Well, that's an interesting question. I will say publicly there have been hearings and recommendations made. Because of some legal challenges to the constitution of the JQC, some of that is on hold right now. So formally, we have attempted to do that, and we're at a point in that, but until there are some appellate decisions those things can't go through. But yes, we are in the process.
How many?
Oh, goodness. There is one that we have already had a trial on. There is another that we've had formal charges on that we are scheduled for trial on this year. There are a number of others that I can't comment because of confidentiality rules, but if you've watched the news in the Atlanta area, you've probably seen some of the issues of misconduct just in this area, and that doesn't encompass the entirety of the state.
Okay, so 2.
Oh, as far as, yes.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And to follow up on Chairman Ballinger's question, I think it would be helpful to know in the data that you're providing from the other states what their prosecutorial rate is in terms of judges that have been prosecuted and removed. But also, I don't know that it factors into this, but there are times when a judge decides that maybe retirement is the better option.
And I think that's a great point. I should have explained that. Thank you for bringing that up. A number of times when we file formal charges or we have investigations, actually it's much like a criminal case. You may, and I know you're working the criminal justice system before a representative, 95% of the cases resolved before a trial. And I will say that we've had a number of judges that for mental incapacity or because of an agreement for discipline, those cases were resolved. And that's just me looking back over 2019 before I took over in December. Knowing and looking back at some of those were resolved short of an actual trial on the matters.
Chairman Werkheiser, you have a question.
Thank you, Chairman. I know we can't backdate stuff, but because it seems like there's consistent appellate challenge there, could that not be remedied legislatively as far as the constitutionality of y'all's oversight?
I think that wow, I can actually talk about this. It's legal, not budget. It's not necessarily a constitutional challenge about how the JQC is constituted right now. It was the way that the process was gone about to get the members confirmed. So it wasn't the actual statute, it was how it was done and whether certain things were filed at the appropriate times.
Okay.
Okay, that's all the questions we have. Members on the... Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Director. Appreciate that presentation. And then we have another presentation from the Court of Appeals. And then our last presenter will be with the business courts. We have a presentation on behalf of the business courts and the prospective budget that's set by, I think, our hopeful Judge Walt Davis. I see him back there. Judge McFadden, good to see you, sir. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for waiting. I'm sorry I'm being patient. I'm sorry it's taken a little longer than than scheduled. I noticed that you have a number of your colleagues are here, and we're happy to see them all.
I'm happy to have them here
looks,
backing
it looks
me
like
up.
it's your it looks like it's your panel.
2/3 of my panel. Both of my panels, actually.
Well, go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Chairman, I have with me Vice Chief Judge McMillan, Presiding Judge Doyle, Colonel Steve Castlin, our Clerk Court Administrator, John Ruggieri, our IT Director, and Jan Kelly, our Fiscal Director. I am grateful for this opportunity to address you, and like the Chief Justice, I take pleasure in having the opportunity in this, the original home of the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals, to express great pleasure at the marvelous new building that has been provided for us. Mr. Chairman, Georgia is the largest state in the Union with a single intermediate appellate court, so citizens of Georgia have the benefit of a single coherent body of law, which is a substantial advantage over the citizens of states such as Florida, Texas, and California, an advantage that is manifest whenever a business person asks a lawyer in Georgia a question. And we're grateful to you for providing us the resources we need to effectively discharge our share of that important responsibility. I will begin with the amended fiscal year budget. Item 5.51 is the cybersecurity insurance. You've already held a number of compelling descriptions of the continuing attack that we are all under, and you're aware of as much as I am of what happened to AOC in the city of Atlanta. We'd very much like to have insurance to protect us from such an eventuality. Judge Coomer is chairing a committee of the Judicial Council dedicated to seeing if we can get a group rate for all of the courts, but we would like to have that protection in place as soon as possible, and we're confident that Mr. Ruggieri has identified a reasonable price range and we can get a good deal. So that's $37,500, item 5.1.1. Item 5.1.2 is related, a cybersecurity assessment or an audit. It's a precondition for insurance, and it's somebody who will supplement Mr. Ruggieri's excellent work in being on top of everything that we can do to minimize our vulnerability. That is an item of $32,570. Third item is 5.1.3. That is expenses related to the move, particularly signage and stationery. There is a change to that number. The number reflects our fiscal director's best effort to identify the known unknowns in terms of cost incidental to moving to a new building, and those have gone up. The number originally was $32,560. We're now looking at $55,089. That is our amended request. I'll turn now to it's called the big budget. The first two items are the continuing versions of items I just mentioned. 5.5.1 is cybersecurity insurance for a full year and ongoing, $75,000. 5.1.2 is a full year of subscriptions to cybersecurity assessment audits and ongoing, $55,000. The next position is 5.1.3, which is systems analyst position. This is a position that we contemplate would also serve the business court, and this position is necessary due to increased technical costs and assist with cybersecurity for both courts. Also for network-wide patching, we have a great deal of interaction with the vendors. It requires hands-on work by an IT person, and so that sort of patching and security end user is what this position would be responsible for. The next two are positions that you heard heard about from the Chief Justice. These are positions pursuant to suggestions when the courts were audited that we've identified that we can have a joint employee. Item 5.1.4 is the Shared Human Resources Manager. That's a $56,444 item, corresponding to the Supreme Court's item 10.7.1. 5.1.5 is a shared payroll coordinator position, again shared with the Supreme Court, a $37,630 item corresponding to the Supreme Court's item 10.1.8. And we contemplate, by the way, that both of these two positions we would share for the Supreme Court would also be available to serve the business court. Item 5.1.6 is our ongoing case management electronic voting system. This is a one-time expense and an ongoing undertaking, facilitating e-voting, facilitating moving closer to a paperless system. It would subserve the efficiency of our court and the ability of our judges who reside in other parts of the state and consequently do a significant amount of their work in their home counties, being able to effectively serve on our court. If this is an undertaking that conceivably could be paused, but the likelihood is that if we do so, the long-term costs will be higher. 5.1.7, software maintenance. This is facilities that we need to back up our servers and be able to handle disaster recovery. This is a license that we purchased last year, and this is the annual ongoing cost for those licenses, $9,300. Finally, 5.1.8 is the rent. This is the amount adjusting to the first full fiscal year in the new building, and this is what the amount will be going forward, at least until the GBA tells us otherwise. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to briefly direct your attention to an omitted item. As you know, historically, the Court of Appeals judges have had 3 career staff attorneys, and the justices have had 2. A few years ago, both courts requested, in addition, a single-term clerk for each judge or justice. I understand that term clerks have worked out well in the Supreme Court, and we have kept asking until this year. We recognize that given the difficult choices before you now, that such a request would be unseemly today. That said, I recently heard the Dean of the University of Georgia School of Law say that 20% of his graduates start their careers working for judges and to extol the benefits of so beginning a legal career. It occurred to me then that mine is the only court sitting in this state or federal, above the level of county magistrate, that is not able to offer such opportunities, and I hope that at a suitable time we will be able to do so. That is my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Judge. Thank you. We appreciate the presentation. A few questions that have come up. The increased funds, this is item 5.1.6. This is increased funds to develop the case management system. I have some concerns about the nature of the system. As I understand it, it would allow for judges to work more remotely in their homes or away as opposed to in the new judicial building. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And in doing so, does that create any isolation problems relevant to the rendering of decisions for your panels?
Well, I'm active in the American Bar Association Appellate Judges Council, so I know judges from many parts of the state, and we are more fortunate than most, particularly now that we're all in a single building, in being physically together as much as we are. Much of our work is done exchanged in writing. Being physically present for part of the week is very valuable to us, but I think with the culture that we have, the ability of judges to work out of the courthouse from, for example, Tuesday to Thursday, does not diminish our ability to benefit from collegiality. I think we're in pretty good shape in that regard.
The other question is, on line 5.1.8, dealing with rental expenses, I want to confirm with you that the amount that you're requesting is a net of the rent that you were previously paid by the General Assembly for rental with GBA on the old judicial facilities.
My staff is nodding, and that is correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Questions from other members of the committee? All right. Seeing none, I appreciate the presentation. We have one last presentation. It's with the business court, Georgia Statewide Business Court, which is, and I did want to say, Judge Coomer, it's nice to see you today. Our members will remember that he had served with many of us when he was here in the General Assembly, and it's nice to see you as well today. And thank you for all the members of the Court of Appeals for attending, and all your staff for your hard work. Chief Judge, we appreciate you and what the court does.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize, Judge Coomer, for his not being in my field of vision when I made the introduction. I also neglected to introduce our Deputy Court Administrator, Chris Smith. Thank you, sir.
Good to have you. Thank you. So we'll hear from the Georgia Statewide Business Court. Walt Davis is going to be presenting today. He has a handout for us and a budget request that is before you, both amended and otherwise. You'll recall that the Statewide Business Court was approved by constitutional amendment by the people of the state of Georgia. I think it was over 80% approval. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Walt, you probably know. And I would call him judge, but you got to be sworn in, and I think we're all anxiously waiting for that day and that invitation, so that we can come to the House chambers with family and friends and interested colleagues to witness that moment. So I guess I'm not sure how to properly address you at this point, Mr. Davis, but hopefully future Judge Davis will address you that way. He has put together a budget, and so everyone has a clear sense of this. He's absolutely new to this entire budgetary process and has been under some very unusual financial pressure in terms of developing this budget, both from his personal standpoint and from the policy or political standpoint as well. And I'll have to say that he has handled it as a gentleman, as a professional, very well, and at least with respect to me. And so he has done his best to put this together. I think he's had great assistance from AOC and from the staff of the Court of Appeals with their great assistance, because right now that court is attached legally and for budget purposes to the Court of Appeals. And so he has been getting a lot of assistance from them in that process. That being to say, he has put this together for us to review, and I'll turn it over to the hopeful future Judge Walt Davis to take over and explain the court to us and his budget request. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And allegedly, if I get out of here by 4:45, I may be a formal unpaid judge. First, let me thank you for the time and counsel you've given me over the last several months, and the opportunity to appear before you. I also want to thank, while I obviously am up here by myself, I didn't get here on my own. I want to thank the Court of Appeals. I put them under a great deal of stress. But in particular, I want to thank their staff, their clerk, Steve Caslin, Jan Kelly, John Ruggieri. They've been fantastic, as have all of the judiciary members I've met throughout this process. What I have given you is a short presentation on the business court, recognizing that I am the last one of the day. It will be short. But what I included hopefully will provide the members who weren't involved in the creation of the business court over the last several years some context as to why I made some of the decisions that I made in the proposal that's in front of you. Let me start, and this is not an act of vanity, but it is a cool fact to me, but it also, I think, indicates why I took this and why I think the business court's important. The business court is the first statewide court created in this state in 113 years since the creation of the Court of Appeals. It starts with one judge, and allegedly you were looking at him. And I'll touch on this a little bit in a moment, but I'm one judge with statewide jurisdiction. And I was sworn or confirmed by the House and Senate Judiciary Committees in August, was appointed in July. Since August, I can't tell you how many miles I've logged, but there are quite a few, speaking to Rotary clubs, bar associations, chambers of commerce, and literally almost everybody but the Girl Scouts. I speak to the Boy Scouts next week. And there is, as I'll touch on, a great deal of enthusiasm about this court. There's a great deal of expectation from this court, from our governor all the way to having spoken to our Chief Justice about it, and I'm sure you aware of the burden that is on me in establishing this. So what have I been doing? Everything from, the way I phrase it is developing the vision of the court. It's everything from the physical plant and architectural plans to rulemaking, this budget, e-filing, case management, identifying and interviewing candidates for the clerk of court, which gets appointed and confirmed in the same manner in which I was. So the budget in front of you, given the absence of the clerk of court, includes both the court and the clerk of court, which I can divide and distinguish for you. In addition to just the numerous sort of speaking engagements and my trip to Kinko's this morning to put together the presentation you have in front of you. Currently, the business court is administratively attached to the Court of Appeals. In discussions with your chairman, we've discussed detaching it this year, making it a standalone entity, but making an example of how we can accomplish creating new entities through a shared services model. And so the hope is that we can leverage the good work of the AOC, who I should have thanked at the outset of this as well. Ms. Clanton and her team have just been indispensable for me. One of the benefits of picking somebody from a large law firm is perhaps the assumption is you get the expertise, but the downside is you certainly get zero familiarity with the way this process works, and the AOC has been just absolutely fantastic. And then two more points. One is that we have about 7 months until this court's operational. So August 1st of 2020 is when we can begin accepting cases. So my wife, who is a consultant, has a fancy Gantt chart for me, helping me explain how I get from here to there. But that's sort of the non-negotiable start date for me. And finally, the last thing is I noted that we've been lucky enough to secure space in the new Judicial Center. Again, not really an exercise in vanity, but I will tell you that was very important to me. I am coming at this in a very commercial way. I view my role here as very similar to starting a small business. And the perception, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And for me, that's an opportunity to make a heck of an impression. But that's fleeting. On the back end, it's really what does this court do, how is it different, and whether we can meet those expectations. And so that's what I'll talk to you a little bit about. Now directing your attention to slide 4, there's a reference to the why of a business court. This is a philosophy that I think underlies why this court was created. This was taken from the House Budget and Research Office, and it mentions economic competitiveness. But it also mentions several times the benefit of a court like this is to provide certainty. It's to provide certainty as to what the law is, front-end comfort and decision-making for small businesses and large businesses alike. Everything from, if you're a business consultant to HR to lawyer to small business, that should matter to you and how you make decisions. Certainty as to how your cases are handled. The House report referenced, and I think correctly, the less time you spend in litigation, it means less money spent. And that should be everybody's goal. Certainty that the judge, in this case me, and my staff, have the necessary expertise and familiarity with these issues. And then there's a side benefit that was referenced, which is the added benefit of unclogging the court system. And that certainly, I think, is a true statement. So how do we get there? The statute and the constitutional amendment that created the business court created kind of a unique jurisdiction, and this is identified on page 6. Historically, the superior courts of the state had exclusive jurisdiction over equitable claims. The business court now shares equity jurisdiction in cases that relate to its underlying subject matter. So just by way of example, the two industries that have written frequently about the creation of this court with some degree of enthusiasm are the restrictive covenant committees of the state bar that deal with restrictive covenants and trade secrets, and the insurance industry. Both of those groups find the equity jurisdiction of the court attractive, the ability to get in and out of court quickly with some degree of efficiency for their clients, many of whom, and in fact most of whom, are probably going to be small businesses that really don't want to spend a ton of money on litigation. And then, of course, you've got the subject matter jurisdictional provisions there. Having some familiarity with the way the court was established, those provisions were basically created as follows. If you can conceive of a business dispute, it's probably captured by the subject matter jurisdiction of the court. And so when it kicks off, the court will have both jurisdiction over existing cases that are pending if the parties transfer the case to the court, and new filings. And just anecdotally, having traveled last time I was in Columbus, a lawyer came up to me in Muskogee County, or referencing a case in Muskogee County he had, said had a motion pending for 2 years. And if it was pending in August, by God, it was coming to my court. And so when I was in my confirmation hearing, they asked me what I was most afraid of, and I said, waking up on August 2nd with no cases. Having traveled the state for most of the last 6 months, that is no longer my biggest fear. So with that background, unless there are any questions, I'll turn to the reasons we're here. Direct your attention to page 7 of the slide report, the slide that I have in front of you, and then I'll talk to you about sort of how I got there. The amended budget that I submitted in September, having only 2 weeks of experience at this, requested somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.426 million. I am happy to report that number, as indicated, is down to $998,374. Having heard your chairman's admonishments about the budget, we brought it down $428,149. How did we get there? I'll direct your attention to the tracking report, item number 5.2.1. It's $178,754. Provide funds for personal services. That is, in large measure, the salary for the business court judge, in addition to an administrative assistant. I have cut that number, $178,764, down by $22,786, basically recognizing that I've done most of this myself to get to this point, and it gives me a little wiggle room if I need to engage help on administrative support, but otherwise between here and June I'll suck it up and issue a full-time assistant. And I'll just talk about the ones I'm cutting, then I'll answer whatever questions you all have. There's a line item for $788,000 for case management and e-filing development. In the way that number was derived was through various proposals I received from groups that wanted to provide those services to the business court, and over the course of time, we were able to get that number down by $388,000 down to $400,000. So that's a large chunk of those savings. And then finally, and that's item 5.2.3. Item 5.2.6, which is provide funds and travel per diem for the statewide business court commission. The statute that created the business court called for a rules commission to help in the development and establishment of rules. We chose that commission in November. It's up and running, but given technology available to most, if not all, of its members, we've been able to find some cost savings there as well. So that number also has been cut in half, and this is, again, 5.2.6. $34,725 is now $17,363, recognizing that grand total of $428,149. So the new total for the amended proposal is $998,374. And I'll stop there before turning to the big budget, as I've heard it called, for any questions.
Mr. Davis, you have you've been kind to provide to me, and I appreciate it, a very thorough breakdown of the individual costs that you're anticipating for your both personal services and initial office setup. That document has been provided to the members of the committee, so you can see that in that respect. And so we appreciate that level of detail, especially given the current budget situation that we're dealing with. There are a couple of things in there that aren't in the PowerPoint, but are there in terms of online legal services, LexisNexis Westlaw contracts, also ongoing IT maintenance cost. And then there was some discussion that Chief Judge McFadden had relayed to us that there was going to be some shared services that are provided by the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court. Are those cost savings that you're sharing, are those being realized, or are those found in the budget proposal that you submitted to me last week?
So for the next 6 months, I am not aware of any, for the amended process, I'm not aware of any cost savings or cost increases associated with being attached to the Court of Appeals. Now, of course, if the detachment occurs, the savings there would be perhaps not needing the additional IT person for the Court of Appeals, because the Chief Justice has graciously offered to allow me to take advantage of one of his staff. And then, of course, the idea would be to enter into an arrangement with the AOC to provide the remainder of the back office services, and they've been gracious enough to provide me with an MOU to that effect.
Okay. All right. And this.
Ultimately, my goal would be, especially the way that we're physically building out the office, would be, not to have a big administrative staff behind the scenes. Maybe one day that's a vision for somebody, but so far, my experience with the AOC and everybody else who supported me over there has at least from a commercial perspective, when I think about starting up a small business, is more than I need. So,
and to be clear, this amended budget request includes your salary and an administrative assistant. Is that correct?
50% on the administrative assistant. That number previously being 45,571 has now been brought down to 22,786.
And the judge's salary, that is for the full year, would that be correct?
That's for the 6 months.
The 6 months, okay.
Right.
All right. And then I see there's statewide business commission expenses. Is that also half a year or the full, is that a 6 month number, or is that
That is a 6 month number, and then it's half of that.
Okay, so we're going from 34,000, we're going to reduce that down?
Correct, down to 17,363.
Okay.
And of course, the commission line item is not in the 21 budget, with the assumption that it will, if not be disbanded, it will at least stand down once the rules are provided to the Supreme Court, which is scheduled to occur at the end of March.
Okay. And then also, is there a cutback as to your case management system build-out?
Yes, and that's 5.2.3, and that number going from 788 to 400, so a decrease of 388,000.
Okay. Thank you. All right, on to the full budget, or your big budget.
So I'll direct your attention just from a summary perspective to slide 8. As you'll see indicated there, the original request was 1.625877. That number has been brought down to 1.552.810, in large measure due to your chairman's request that I go back and think about where I can tighten up staffing. So the savings there is $73,067. That number, and I'll get into the precise details. That number divides as follows. For the court, it is $963,140. And for the clerk of court, it's $589,670 for the total of $1.552,810. And so I was rather proud to hear, I think it was Justice Boggs referenced that it cost the state $1 million for a new judgeship, and I was able to come under that. Talk about where the savings came in.
That was for a full year, though, right?
Right. 5.2.1 under provide funds to establish the statewide business court. That number is 1.318363. That number is being reduced by 73,067 by the elimination of one position in the staffing plan. There are a number of other items captured by the operating costs for the court. That's $307,514. And those, I'm happy to go through those items if you wish, or if there are any questions.
No, I think what we, on the next page, you've got, let's say the next page, it's actually the appendix. You have a breakdown of your staff court, the clerk court, if you look on the second page after the appendix. The question that you and I have talked about, and the question that I wrestle with is and lay this out in the big picture. The big picture scheme here is that we are establishing a business court in the state of Georgia for the purposes of providing the jurisdictional relief that you've discussed, also providing, facilitating, and the quick resolution of financial or business-related litigation. Time being the worst enemy of anyone in those particular positions, as you well know, that you can, as a business, if you're bound up and tied up in litigation, you are wasting money that could otherwise be spent elsewhere, thus making a quick resolution typically the best outcome, even if there's a loss in revenues initially. That being kind of a big picture statement that this is to enhance the business opportunity to resolve those conflicts quickly, adjudicate those conflicts quickly. There's also the balance of that aspirational goal against the cost of doing so. And in the business court staff, you have a plan for two term clerks, 1-year terms each, one judicial assistant. It says 50% shared, so we'll have to get clarity on that. And then one staff attorney / court administrator and document clerk, shared 50% there. And I'm assuming that's being shared with the clerk's office. Correct. Okay. So it's effectively the full staffer, but they're going to have two hats to wear, I understand. The clerk's office is going to have one deputy clerk and one document clerk, and then the two shared positions. The concerns that I have are with these numbers. Could you explain and justify why you're choosing these numbers for additional assistance when we don't have a docket? I mean, you may have some anticipated numbers, but we have no real numbers to to show from what this court will be for the second half of the year, really.
Right.
And so typically when we do these things, we always try to do these in a measured way. We try to look at what with some anticipation of what the workflow may be, no different with the kinship care program that we were talking about earlier today, trying to look at, see how much do we invest into that, and then see what that return on the investment is. So knowing that we'll be halfway through a year and in the beginnings of the fiscal year, but with the opportunity of picking up the supplemental in the following year, where we could add positions if we needed to, right. If the demand justifies it. So that's kind of the big picture concept or discussion I wanted to raise with you and see what your response would be to the committee on looking at that, looking at it from that fiscally responsible perspective.
Sure. So having talked to you, I have the benefit of talking to you about this before. I've surveyed a number of folks in addition to having the travels that I mentioned earlier. I don't think workload is going to be an issue for this court. On some level, I took it as an article of faith that it was established out of the assumption that it was needed and would be supported. And that's certainly been validated by the conversations I've had and the experiences I've had over the last 6 months. I come from a background where I clerked for the federal court. Most of my practice was with the Delaware Chancery Court. And so the balance I was trying to strike here, rather than propose hiring 3 full-time permanent judicial clerks, was striking a balance of, if in fact we are busy, I only get one chance to make a first impression on the business community and the legal community in the state that this is a viable, serious entity that the people voted on, that you all passed, and ultimately that I left a very nice role to come try to take this on. That said, recognizing the idea that there needs to be a balance. And so what I did was especially because I think the experience that Judge McFadden referenced is so formidable, I went with 2 clerks, term clerks. The benefit of that is that in the event that we don't see that need, I'm not firing 2 people that did the same thing I did and took a leap of faith and came to work for Judge Davis. Rather, it expires on its own term, so to speak.
But if we were not to give you those 2 term clerks, then the Court of Appeals couldn't make the argument that they're the only court without term clerks. Is that right? And
I'm quite certain that Judge McFadden would do that. And I will gladly take 2 permanent staff attorneys in lieu thereof. For more money. The other piece of it was I recognized that there was a savings associated with going with the term clerk route. That's right. So in eliminating one of the roles that the clerk of court, who should be announced relatively soon, so that piece of the staffing plan was developed in conjunction with the candidate of choice. We tightened the belt on a document clerk and said, well, we're not going to have just a pure staff attorney as the 3rd member of the court. What we will have is somebody who is interested in and capable of both supporting the court when I am riding circuit, which is the expectation that I will be not sitting in the nice new building in Atlanta all the time, but rather meeting the parties where they are across the state, that there will be somebody there to help the trains run. By the same token, that person needs to be interested in helping support the new clerk of court and standing up an entirely new clerk's office, under the theory that we all do windows. That being said, what you can see, there's a balance here. There's 3 FTEs on both sides. That was intentional. And in the event that it becomes just a nice early retirement for me and we're not very busy, then of course you won't see 2 term clerks in the requested budget for next year. That being said, what I did, instead of just sort of guessing, and these numbers it's hard to back into numbers, but you had asked me to go look, and I did. I have 4 data sources: the local federal court, the local superior courts, the business court. I kind of combined as one, the North Carolina Business Court, and the Delaware Chancery Court. In pure business cases in 2018, the Georgia federal courts, and you'll note that includes the Northern District here in Atlanta, there were 618 civil cases filed. And I apologize to all of you in the audience who are going to have to listen to this, but it is important. There were 338 civil cases filed in the Middle District and 340 cases filed in the Southern District. Of those, and if you just set aside the broader jurisdiction of this court, 862 of those cases in the Northern District were contract cases. And the numbers I gave you were per judge, not total, but per judge. So when you break that down, there's 66 just purely contract cases per judge in the Northern District in 18, 84 in the Middle District, and 58 in the Southern District.
But how many of those contract cases, or any of these cases, would meet the qualifications for the jurisdiction of the business court?
So from a diversity of jurisdiction perspective, they could have been filed in the state court had this been available. From a monetary perspective, no way to know whether those would have met the injunctive relief standards or the equitable jurisdiction to get entry into this court, or the amount in controversy. That's why some of these numbers are fuzzy, but there is supply. That's for sure. The North Carolina Business Court, between 2016 and 2018, with 5 judges on that court, there were 324 total cases filed in the business court in North Carolina with 5 judges. In 17, there were 289, and in 16, there were 204. The chief judge there has 2 law clerks and 1 staff attorney servicing their needs as the chief judge. And feel free to tell me to stop. Then I have the Metro Atlanta Business Court. They average about somewhere between 20 and 30 business cases in Fulton County for the year. I asked AOC, and again, some of these numbers are fuzzy, to pull how many just purely contract cases get filed in this state every year. In 16, there were 13,432 across the state. And that's just in Superior Court. There's another 17,000 in state court. In 17, there were 14,856. And in 17, there were 18,274 in state court. So 35,800, almost 36,000 in 17, and another 30,000 in 18. That doesn't include the injunction cases, which I also have the numbers for, but they're somewhat fuzzy. Again, the supply is there. Yeah. What I have to do is make this the attractive venue to file. And by contrast, in Delaware Chancery, which also the chief judge has two law clerks and a staff attorney, in addition to a whole bunch of administrative support, which is just a side note. You'll note that what you'll see in my budget is 0 administration, and that's intentional. Every dollar that I've asked for is going to meeting the parties where they are. This is the first trial court in the history of the state that's going to be expected to publish regularly, and early and often. And as I go on the stump and talk about this court, that's what I'm going to try to do. So in order to do that, what you see in this proposal is what I need to accomplish that.
So, sort of wrapping this up, then, would it be fair to say that the citizens of the state of Georgia have approved a statewide business court, obviously with the intention of facilitating business litigation throughout the state and resolving those quickly, and that your budget proposal is designed to be fiscally responsible given the upstart of the court, but also in a manner that you believe will provide, will satisfy the public's overwhelming desire for this court to succeed.
Couldn't have said it better.
Okay. Any questions from members of the committee? Yes. Chairman Ballinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know that we have gone long, and but just in looking over your this that you provided to us, I'm not on a track sheet or anything. As far as I was just wondering where some of those numbers came from for the furniture and that sort of thing. You allow for over $6,000 for just travel expenses to attend what's colloquially, I think, known as baby judge school. Can you speak to that and just kind of where those numbers, that just seems, it's in Reno and, you can look at flights for Reno. Dave Belton can take you there. Those are, my math was not adding up to 6,000, and also some of the furniture just seemed fairly pricey.
Sure. So the budget was developed in conjunction with the help of the Court of Appeals. So every number that you see in here was sitting down and going over it with the Court of Appeals. I also sat down with Chief Judge McBurney at the Fulton County Superior Court and asked for his reaction. The travel and registration is for baby judge school, which is rather expensive. There's also travel in here. For example, I'm going to Augusta on Thursday night. There and back to keynote their annual Bar Association lunch. And then Friday afternoon, I'm getting in the car and driving to Valdosta to speak at another event at the Creston, one of the law firms down there. Right now, that's gratis. I'm doing it because I know at some point in time, the benefit will be there to the court having done it. So some of those travel expenses, in addition to others I'll take, are going to encompass that, which, as part of this process, there was a perception that this was an Atlanta-based court to serve Atlantans, businesses in Atlanta. And what I'm trying my darndest to do is convince the general public that that's not the case. And the only way I can do that is to get in my car and travel. So that's in large measure where a lot of that travel expense is coming from. The FF&E you asked about was developed with the Court of Appeals, with the help of the Court of Appeals, I think, just based on my direct conversations based on their experience having lived through the process before I did. And we are in the process of trying to recycle as much as we possibly can as my plans get approved for the court over there. We have walked the building and said, can you use that, and can you use that, and can you use that? So we very, very intentionally will repurpose what we can rather than just buying new off the shelf.
Mr. Davis, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for also working basically for free to establish the court in a way that you think will be successful and to lay the foundations for the future of the court so it may grow and be helpful to all Georgians. Thank you for your presentation and your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that, I want to thank the Court of Appeals staff for assisting Mr. Davis. I know that's been a challenge. I also want to thank the Chief Justice, Supreme Court, and your staff also for working with him. Cynthia Clanton with the AOC has also been helpful, I know, in this process, and I want to extend my gratitude to all of you for chipping in and trying to help our new fledgling statewide court take off and be successful. With all that, I will bring this meeting to a close, and we'll have our next meetings tomorrow afternoon, and we'll continue from there, and we'll also have meetings on Wednesday. Same room, I think it's the same time for kickoff, so, and we'll try to keep it moving, but obviously there's a lot to discuss. Thank you again for being here, and this will bring it to a close.